After 18 years of marriage, I was sure I knew my wife. However, one anonymous message destroyed everything. Does your wife always touch her boss like that? This question turned my life upside down. When we were returning from the corporate gala, her secret smile while looking at her phone made my heart clench. I could not have imagined that the truth would lead me to a confrontation with my main competitor in a hotel room where he was waiting for my wife. My name is Kevin Walsh. I am 45 years old. For the last 18 years, I have been building my career at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, rising to the position of regional manager for the Northeastern Division. Under my command are 7 states, hundreds of employees, and multi-million-dollar revenues. Professionally, I have achieved everything I wanted. I married Pamela, my college sweetheart, right after graduation. We have a 14-year-old son, Tyler, who is currently going through a typical teenage rebellion. We live in a beautiful colonial-style house in Connecticut with a 3-car garage and a swimming pool. A real American dream, but dreams have a way of turning into nightmares. It happened on a September Friday after our company's annual celebration. Pam was really looking forward to this event. She bought a new dress, spent the whole day at the salon, and looked stunning. As an investor relations manager at a competing firm, she understood the importance of such events. Networking, small talk, the skill of playing by the rules of the corporate world. We were driving home along quiet streets. Pam was sitting in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone and occasionally smiling at the screen. Jazz radio was playing softly. I tried to start a conversation about business, mentioning a promising contract, but she answered with a short, barely looking up. At that moment, my phone in my jacket pocket vibrated. At first, I did not pay attention. But when the device buzzed insistently again, I pulled over at a rest stop. Pam asked if everything was all right. I said I needed to check a notification. The message came from an unknown number. Does your wife always touch her boss like that? Check your email. There are pictures from tonight. The blood froze in my veins. I looked at my wife. She was again absorbed in her correspondence, her face illuminated by the blue light of the screen. Could she be writing to him right now, sitting next to me? I asked who was texting her so late, trying to speak calmly despite my racing heart. Just Jen about the spa tomorrow, she answered without a moment's hesitation. Another lie added to a collection whose existence I had never even suspected. I sat in the car, my finger hovering over the email icon. If I opened the email, there would be no going back. Pam began to show impatience, complaining about the late hour. I took a deep breath and opened the attachments. There were 5 photographs. In the first, Pam was laughing with Brandon Pierce, the CEO of NEA Pharmaceuticals, our main competitor. There was nothing unusual about that, just business socializing, but the next shots made me freeze. Pam is holding Brandon's hand, leaning in too close. Brandon is whispering in her ear, his hand on her lower back. And the last image, the 2 of them walking into a service corridor, their fingers intertwined. The timestamp on the photo indicated it was taken just 30 minutes before we left. Pam tried to look at my screen, asking who was sending work emails at this hour. I locked the phone, lying that it was my vice president of sales, a notorious workaholic. My thoughts were racing. Brandon Pierce, the man who had been poaching my employees for a year, the man who had stolen a major contract from me last quarter, and now my wife. I pulled back onto the road, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Pam continued smiling at her phone. Each of her smiles felt like a knife stab. I remarked that she seemed to have had a good time, to which she gave a stock answer. When I mentioned her conversation with Pierce, she hesitated for a moment, but quickly brushed it off, calling it part of the job. I needed to act strategically. If I started a scandal now, she would have time to warn her lover and cover her tracks. We arrived home. Through the window, I saw our nanny, Mrs. Rodriguez. Tyler was probably already asleep. Pam immediately went to the bedroom, not even kissing me goodnight. Had she always been this cold, or was I too busy to notice? I stayed in the car, looking at the pictures over and over again. 18 years of marriage, a son, a shared life, and all for what? For a younger, more influential man? The banality of it made me nauseous. My phone vibrated again. Want to know where they are meeting tomorrow? The Hilton Hotel downtown, 2 p.m. The room is booked in her name. I did not know who this anonymous person was, but right now, he seemed like my only ally. After seeing the nanny out, I checked on my son. Tyler was sleeping with his headphones on next to his textbook. Despite everything, I was proud of him. An honor student, a star player on the basketball team. Looking at him, I felt a surge of protective anger. Pam's betrayal was directed not only at me, but also at our family. I locked myself in my study. I needed a plan. Simply catching them in the act was not enough. I needed evidence of financial infidelity. As a regional manager, I was used to solving problems methodically. I logged into our joint bank accounts. Among the ordinary expenses, I found some strange ones. A trip to New York when Brandon was there for a summit, dinners at restaurants near his office, purchases of jewelry from Tiffany that I had never seen her wear. In the morning, I went for a run to clear my head. By the time I returned, the plan was ready. Pam was in the kitchen, dressed too carefully for an ordinary Saturday. Tyler was eating breakfast, not looking up from his phone. I pretended to be preparing for an important presentation on Monday. Pam announced she was going to the spa for the whole day with a friend. I calmly agreed, which visibly reassured her. After she left, I asked Tyler to spend the evening at a friend's house. I did not want him to be in the middle of the coming storm. At 1:30 p.m., I was already in the lobby of the Hilton. I had changed into jeans and a simple shirt to blend in with the crowd. At 1:52 p.m., Brandon Pierce appeared at the entrance. He looked like a successful executive on a day off. The sight of this man filled me with rage, but I kept my composure. This was corporate warfare, and to win, you had to play smart. He approached the front desk, exchanged a few words with the clerk, and headed toward the elevators. I overheard the room number, 1142, booked under the name Mrs. Walsh. She had used our last name. 10 minutes later, Pam arrived. She looked stunning in a dress I had never seen before. She went straight to the elevators. I waited 5 minutes and followed her. The elevator ride to the 11th floor felt surreal, as if I were watching someone else's life fall apart from the outside. I found room 1142 without difficulty. After pausing for a moment at the door, I listened. Muffled laughter, the pop of a champagne cork, the clink of glasses. I had a choice. I could knock and have a face-to-face confrontation. I could call her cell phone, or I could simply leave, pretending I had seen nothing. Instead, I took out my phone, turned on the voice recorder, and used the key card I had obtained from the front desk. Convincing the staff to give me a duplicate had been surprisingly easy. I just said my wife had already checked in, and I had lost my copy. The door opened silently. They were sitting on the sofa in the living room, glasses in their hands, his hand on her shoulder. They were so absorbed in each other that they only noticed my presence 5 seconds later. "Don't let me interrupt you," I said in an icy tone. Pam's glass fell to the floor with a crash. "Kevin, what? How?" she stammered. Brandon jumped up, frantically adjusting his shirt. "Listen, Walsh, this is not what you think." I walked further into the room, maintaining a frightening calm that was more powerful than any scream. "It appears my wife, with whom I have lived for 18 years, is having an affair with my business competitor, who has been trying to destroy my career for the past year." Pam stood up, her face turning deathly pale. "Kevin, please, let's talk." "The time for talking is over." My voice remained steady, despite the storm inside. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, looking at Brandon. "How long?" Each word sounded like a gunshot. 6 months, she whispered. 6 months of lies. 6 months of coming home to me and Tyler, continuing to pretend. Brandon tried to step closer. "Listen, buddy. I am not your buddy," I cut him off. "The only thing I want to hear is how you will explain to your board of directors your affair with a competitor's wife in the middle of negotiations." His face changed. Corporate espionage takes two to play. Brandon tried to claim it was a personal matter, but I reminded him about the meetings he scheduled with Pam during our annual financial report. Pillow talk about confidential deals. The company's leadership would be thrilled to hear such news. Pam, trembling, asked me to think of Tyler. "I am thinking about him," I answered. "That is why I am here, and not at home where our son could hear the truth about the mother who lied to the whole family for 6 months. I informed her that I was filing for divorce on Monday. I had detailed proof of their affair. Given her position at the competing firm and the suspicious leaks of information, I advised her not to contest the terms of the property settlement. Pam could not believe that I might suspect her of passing corporate secrets. 6 months ago, I could not believe you were capable of cheating. I pointed to the hotel room surroundings. Brandon hurried to leave as soon as things got too hot. When we were alone, Pam collapsed on the sofa, suggesting therapy and a fresh start. There is nothing left for us to work on, Pam. You made your choice. She called it a mistake, but I disagreed. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, not leading a double life for 6 months, visiting hotels and going on trips. She started talking about finances, the house, and Tyler's college fund. I assured her that everything was documented, including the spending from our joint accounts on her affair. My lawyer would contact her tomorrow. Pam was shocked that I already had an attorney. Unlike her, I do not make important decisions without preparation. For 18 years, I believed she was the only person I could trust, but now that foundation was destroyed forever. I decided to spend the night at the Marriott Hotel. I asked her to tell Tyler something appropriate about my absence, so that tomorrow we could discuss everything with him together. When she spoke of love, I answered that people who love do not betray. Leaving that room was incredibly hard, not because I wanted to stay, but because I was leaving behind my entire past life and future plans. But I was not going to live in lies any longer. At the hotel bar, I ordered a whiskey. My phone was blowing up with messages from Pam, ranging from angry to pleading. At 8 in the evening, Tyler called. He sensed that something strange was going on. I could not lie to my son, but I did not want to share such news over the phone. He asked about a divorce, and my evasive answer he took as confirmation. Our son hung up, accusing me of never being home. The accusation stung, even though there was some truth to it, but I refused to take responsibility for someone else's choices. Marcus, my old friend, called. Pam had already complained to his wife. Upon learning that she had been with Brandon Pierce, he was horrified. Later, I received an email from attorney Rachel Goldstein. She agreed to meet on Sunday morning. Looking at an old photo of 6-year-old Tyler on my shoulders, I realized that from now on, everything I did, I would do for him. Pam destroyed our marriage, but I would not let her actions destroy our son's sense of security. Sunday morning brought ruthless clarity. No amount of alcohol could drown out the reality. A difficult conversation with a teenager awaited me. I went home rehearsing the words. Pam was sitting in the kitchen with red-rimmed eyes. She told me Tyler was at a friend's house and that I should pick him up. We agreed to present a united front. No details about the affair and no mutual accusations. This was adult business, not his concern. The familiar rhythm of co-parenting felt strange against the ruins of our marriage. An hour later, I was pulling up to Jason's house. Tyler got into the car without looking up from his phone. "Hey, son," I began, preparing for the hardest moment of my life. "Hey, don't look away. Mom and I need to have a serious talk when we get home." Tyler finally looked up. "Are you getting a divorce? The bluntness of teenage boys is both a blessing and a curse. We have some very serious problems, Tyler. We will explain everything when we get home." "She cheated on you, didn't she?" His voice was completely flat. I nearly lost control of the car from the shock. "Why would you think that?" Our son shrugged, trying to look indifferent, although his fingers were gripping his phone in a death grip. "She was acting strange, constantly checking messages and smiling at the screen. And one time I heard her on the phone. Her voice sounded weird. She was giggling. It wasn't you." My heart clenched. Tyler had noticed what I myself never had time for. "We will discuss it all at home," I repeated gently. "I hate her," he muttered. "No, you don't." Despite what had happened, I could not let him go down that path. "She did bad things, but she is still your mother. But she hurt you. She hurt both of us." I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "Relationships are complicated, Tyler. Adults make mistakes, sometimes very serious ones." "So now you are defending her?" There was clear confusion in his voice. "No, what happened was wrong, and there will be consequences. but hating your mother will only hurt you in the end. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Tyler asked so quietly I could barely hear him, "Dad, are you okay?" That question affected me more than any news of Pam's betrayal. My son was worried about me. "I will be," I promised. And for the first time since I read that fateful message, I truly believed it. The family meeting went more or less as expected. Tyler swung between sullen silence and sharp questions. Pam cried. I maintained outward calm, trying to present a united parental front despite the inner storm. "So where will I live?" Tyler demanded, turning to practical matters. "We haven't decided that yet," Pam began. "For now, you will stay here," I interrupted firmly. "I will rent an apartment nearby so your school schedule and practices are not disrupted." Tyler looked at Pam with fury. "I want to live with Dad." She flinched. "Tyler, honey, don't call me that," he snapped. "You ruined everything," I stepped in. "That's enough, Tyler. This situation concerns only your mother and me. I understand you are upset, but disrespect is not acceptable." He bolted to his room. Pam sank onto the sofa, exhausted. "He hates me." "He is hurting," I corrected her. "Give him time." After assuring Tyler that I would be back tomorrow to help with his basketball practice, I packed the essentials and left. The Marriott Hotel would do for another night while I looked for a short-term rental. Marcus called as I was checking in. "Free for dinner? Diana is really worried about you." An hour later, I was sitting across from Marcus and Diana in a quiet steakhouse. Their sympathy was almost tangible. "Rumors are flying around the company," Marcus reported. "Brandon called an emergency meeting with his executive team this morning." Diana squeezed my hand. "How is Tyler handling it?" "As well as can be expected," I sighed. "He's angry and confused." "And you?" she pressed. I considered the question honestly. "Surprisingly, I'm okay. The shock is wearing off. I'm just processing it all." "Pam called me," Diana admitted, "begging me to convince you to change your mind." I shook my head. "Some things cannot be fixed." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Damn right. You deserve better, Kev. We've got your back. And Tyler's too," Diana added. "Whatever you need." Their support was warming. In the midst of my marriage's collapse, I was rediscovering the value of true friendship. Later, while working in my hotel room, my phone screen lit up with a LinkedIn notification. Rachel Winters, Vice President of Operations at Westlake Pharmaceuticals, a professional I had always respected, had sent a message. "Heard about your situation. Once the dust settles, Westlake would be interested in discussing opportunities. Your success managing the Northeast region has not gone unnoticed." Interesting. Perhaps this upheaval would lead to unexpected prospects. Brandon's influence at my old company did not extend to other firms, especially those impressed by my professional ethics. As I fell asleep, I realized something. For the first time in many months, perhaps years, I felt free from a heavy burden. The constant anxiety I had attributed to work stress was, in fact, a subconscious awareness of Pam's deception. Tomorrow would bring practical difficulties, lawyers, finances, Tyler's emotional needs. But tonight, I acknowledged a surprising truth. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to what you truly need. Autumn leaves crunched under my feet as I walked along the sideline during Tyler's basketball game. 6 months had passed since that fateful night. 6 months of recovery, adjustment, and discovering who Kevin Walsh was outside of his failed marriage. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago. Pam did not contest my terms, probably realizing that the evidence I had gathered would only humiliate her further if made public. She kept the house, I kept my retirement accounts, and we split the remaining assets equally. Tyler split his time between us, though he spent most weeknights at my downtown apartment, closer to his school. Brandon Pierce paid a professional price for his indiscretion. After rumors of our confrontation spread, the board quietly transferred him to a subsidiary in Arizona. Officially, it was not a demotion, but everyone in the industry understood it was exile. Karma had its own schedule. I accepted the job offer at Westlake Pharmaceuticals. The significant salary increase and broader responsibilities were secondary factors at first. Mainly, I wanted to distance myself from the memories of my old job. But this new start turned out to be professionally inspiring. For the first time in years, I felt excitement, engagement, and self-worth. Dad, did you see that shot? Tyler shouted, running over to me during a break. A three-pointer from downtown, I confirmed with a smile. Coach is going to start calling you Curry. He rolled his eyes but could not hide his pleasure. The anger that had dominated his feelings in the early months had gradually subsided. He had started therapy, his own choice, which surprised me, and was developing healthy ways to cope with the family breakup. Mom is here, he said, nodding toward the stands. I looked over. Pam was sitting 3 rows up, politely applauding. Our eyes met for a moment. She gave a tentative smile. I nodded in acknowledgement before turning my attention back to Tyler. Good. She wouldn't miss your game. I meant it sincerely. Despite everything, Pam loved our son, and I had made significant efforts to preserve that relationship. My own parents' bitter divorce had taught me the damage that a war between mother and father inflicts on children. After the game, she's taking me to your place, Tyler confirmed. Movie night still on? Absolutely. Popcorn is ready. As he ran back to his team, I marveled at his resilience. Children adapt when the adults in their lives prioritize stability and respect. I had taken those words to heart, suppressing my anger when necessary, and facilitating Tyler's communication with his mother despite my personal feelings. My phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. Good luck to Tyler. Dinner tomorrow still on? I smiled, quickly typing a confirmation. Olivia Bell had entered my life completely unexpectedly, a marketing director at Westlake with a sharp mind and an even sharper sense of humor. We started as colleagues, then became friends, and recently moved into dating territory. Slowly, cautiously, but with genuine hope. Life, as I had discovered, has a way of offering new beginnings precisely when you least expect them. Exactly 1 year after receiving that anonymous message, I stood in my kitchen, brewing coffee and watching the sun rise over the city skyline. My new apartment had magnificent views, one of the perks of my position at Westlake. Tyler sat at the kitchen island, devouring breakfast before school. At 15, he had grown 3 full inches in the past year, necessitating a complete wardrobe overhaul. His relationship with Pam had stabilized into a cautiously warm one. Recently, she had started dating again. Thankfully, it was no one from our professional circle, and Tyler took it in stride, if without much enthusiasm. Dad, can Ben stay over on Friday? Coach canceled Saturday's practice. Sure, I agreed. Just remember, Olivia's coming for dinner. He rolled his eyes good-naturedly. I know, I'll be polite. You're always polite, I said, ruffling his hair as he dodged in mock outrage. My relationship with Olivia had been steadily developing over the past 6 months. She understood the complex dynamics of blended families, having been through her own divorce several years ago. She never demanded more than Tyler or I were ready to give, but she was always there. Later that morning, Marcus stopped by my office at Westlake. A strange anniversary, he said, sinking into the chair across from my desk. You remember? I asked dryly. Hard to forget. That night at the Marriott, you looked like a dead man walking. He studied me carefully. You're different now. Older, wiser, more cynical in some ways. But happier, he simply stated. The observation struck me, but I could not deny its accuracy. Despite the pain and upheaval, I had indeed found a clarity and purpose that had been missing in the final years of my marriage. That evening, as Olivia and I walked along the waterfront after dinner, she took my hand. What are you thinking about? Just reflecting, I admitted. 1 year ago, my life fell apart. And yet here you are, she finished my thought. Still standing, and stronger for it. I nodded, squeezing her hand. I never thanked you, you know. For what? For your patience. For understanding that trust doesn't come easily to me anymore. She stopped and turned to face me. Trust has to be earned, Kevin, and I am willing to put in the work. Looking into her eyes, I understood that the person I had become, hardened by betrayal but not defined by it, was perhaps better prepared for genuine partnership than the person I had been before. The anonymous sender who had exposed Pam's affair never revealed their identity. Sometimes I wondered who had cared enough, who had stepped forward to shatter the comfortable illusion I had been living in. But ultimately, it did not matter. What mattered was that I had managed to build something new on those ruins. I think I'm finally ready, I said quietly to Olivia, to move on, truly forward. Her smile was worth every painful step of the journey that had brought me here. Sometimes the end of one story is simply the beginning of another, a much better one. I accidentally overheard my wife in a restaurant saying the most devastating things about me. She called me worthless, boring, a walking ATM. She had no idea that her husband was sitting 3 booths away from her, planning her complete destruction. My name is Preston Wells. I am 45 years old and I run a logistics company that employs 63 people across 3 states. For 20 years, I built this business from nothing. I started with one truck and a dream. I ended up with a fleet capable of moving mountains, provided you pay the freight charges. I believed I was securing a stable future for my family. It turned out I was just painting a target on my own back. Claudia and I have been married for 18 years. We have 2 children. Daniel, who is 17, is preparing for college, and our 14-year-old daughter, Iris, who still thinks her old man worked a miracle. At least, I hope she keeps that opinion after what is about to happen. The night everything fell apart started like any other business dinner. I was at Romano's, that upscale Italian place downtown, trying to close a deal with a potential client from Memphis. A big contract worth about $2 million in annual revenue, if I could sign it. I was sitting in a far corner booth with high backs that make you feel like you are in your own private world. That is when I heard her voice. Claudia was 3 booths behind me, and at first I barely recognized her laugh. It was different, sharper, more alive than anything I had heard from her in recent months. My first thought was surprise. She had told me she was having dinner with her college friend Sarah, catching up on old times. But this did not sound like a conversation between girlfriends. Then I heard her say my name, and everything inside me went cold. "Preston is so predictable, it's painful," she was saying in that tone she used when she thought she was being clever. "He thinks providing for the family makes him some kind of hero. Like writing checks is the same as being a real man." I should have stood up right then. I should have walked over and confronted what was happening. Instead, I sat still. The client across from me was asking about shipping schedules while my world began spinning off its axis. "There's no fire left in him, Dwight," Claudia continued. The mention of another man's name hit me like a truck. No passion, no spontaneity, just work, 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 and those boring stories about freight routes and warehouse efficiency. God, sometimes I feel like I'm married to a calculator. The man's voice was deeper, confident, and it made my jaw clench. "So are you staying? You're only 43, Claudia. You have time to start over." "The money," she replied simply, and I swear I could hear her shrug. "Preston built a nice little empire, and once Daniel finishes school and goes off to college, I won't feel guilty about taking half." Dwight, that's probably the worst thing I've ever said about anyone. But my husband right now is just a financial safety net. I'm counting down the days until I can cash in my share. That is when I realized I had just overheard the most terrible words my wife had ever spoken about me. In that moment, sitting in that restaurant booth while my client was still talking about shipping schedules, I made a decision that would change everything. She will never see my punch coming. Somehow I managed to finish that business dinner. Don't ask me how. My mind was spinning like a broken compass, but my mouth kept moving on autopilot. The client from Memphis shook my hand, said he would give me an answer by Friday, and left, never suspecting that he had just witnessed the collapse of a man's world in real time. Claudia was still at her table when I stood up, her back to me. She was leaning forward, laughing at something this Dwight character was saying. Even from behind, I could read the body language. The way she touched her neck, played with her hair. This was not a meeting with an old friend. This was a woman on a date. I paid my bill and walked past their table on my way out. I got a good look at him. About 45 years old, athletic build, expensive suit. One of those guys who probably drives a BMW and talks about his CrossFit workouts at parties. Obviously, everything I am not. Neither of them noticed me. And why would they? According to my wife, I was just a walking ATM with no personality. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching them through the restaurant windows. They ordered dessert. She fed him a bite of tiramisu. He reached out and squeezed her hand. Business as usual for a couple, except she was my wife, and he was definitely not me. My phone buzzed with a message. "Running late with Sarah. Don't wait up. Love you." Love you. 2 words that used to mean everything. Now they felt like counterfeit money in my pocket. I drove home in a daze, muscle memory guiding me along familiar streets while my brain tried to process what I had seen. Daniel was in his room, doing homework. Music seeped through his closed door. Iris was asleep, her face peaceful in the hallway nightlight. These children, our children, had no idea that their mother was planning to blow up their lives over a midlife crisis in a bigger bank account. I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat in my home office, staring at the family photographs on the wall. Our wedding day, vacations, Christmas mornings, all of it suddenly felt like an elaborate theater production where I was the only one who didn't know I was performing. Claudia came home at 11:47 p.m. I heard the click of her heels on the hardwood and the way she carefully closed the front door. She peeked into the office, where I pretended to be studying shipping manifests. "Hey, honey," she said in an artificially bright voice. "How was your dinner?" I looked at her, this woman I had shared a bed with for 18 years, and saw a complete stranger. "Productive," I replied shortly. "How was Sarah?" "Oh, you know Sarah," my wife said with a dismissive wave. "Same old stories about her ex-husband and her terrible job. Poor thing never changes." The lies rolled off her tongue so smoothly. I almost admired the craftsmanship. "I'm going to bed," she announced, already turning away. "Don't stay up too late with those reports." She kissed me on the forehead. A gesture that once felt loving now felt like a consolation prize. After she left, I sat there for another hour, planning my next move, because this was not over. This was only the beginning. The next morning, I did something I had never done in 20 years of marriage. I called in sick to work and followed my wife. Claudia left the house at her usual time, 8:15 a.m., with coffee in hand and that fake smile she had been wearing lately. She told the kids she had an early client meeting, kissed them both goodbye, and walked out as if heading to a normal workday at the office. I waited 5 minutes, then got into my personal car, not the work truck she would recognize, and followed her through the morning traffic. Routine surveillance, nothing fancy, just a husband trying to confirm what his gut already knew. She did not go to the marketing firm. Instead, she drove across town to a coffee shop called The Daily Grind, one of those places that charges $6 for what used to cost 50 cents. I parked across the street and watched through the window as she sat at a corner table, checking her phone every 30 seconds like she was waiting for someone. At 9:23 a.m., Dwight walked in. In the daylight, he looked even more polished. Starched shirt, expensive watch, that confident walk that comes when you never have to worry about making payroll or feeding 63 employees. He slid into the chair across from my wife like he owned the place. I could not hear their conversation, but I did not need to. The body language told the whole story, leaning in, touching hands across the table, the way she threw her head back at his jokes. This was not her first coffee date. This was a routine. They stayed for 47 minutes. I know because I timed it, sitting in my car like some cheap private detective. When they walked out together, heading to their different cars in the parking lot, he pulled her in for a kiss that lasted too long for a casual goodbye. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought it might crack. After that, I followed Claudia to her actual office. I watched her walk inside like nothing had happened. Then I drove to my company, told my assistant I was feeling better, and buried myself in logistics reports. But my thoughts were not on shipping schedules. They were on planning. That evening, I acted normal. I asked about her day, listened to her detailed lies about client meetings and project deadlines. She was good at it. Smooth, detailed, convincing. It made me wonder how long she had been practicing. "How was your client meeting this morning?" I asked casually over dinner. "Exhausting," Claudia replied without blinking. "A new campaign for a restaurant chain. They want to change everything at the last minute." Daniel looked up from his plate. "Which restaurant, Mom?" For just a fraction of a second, I saw panic flicker across her face. "Oh, it's still confidential." She recovered quickly. "You know how it works." Our son nodded and went back to his food. But I had caught that moment of uncertainty, the first visible sign that the lies were becoming harder to maintain. Over the next week, I became a man on a mission. During lunch breaks and after work, I started documenting everything: times, places, recordings of phone calls I could access through our shared account, credit card statements showing charges I did not recognize. The coffee shop became a regular stop for them. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, the same corner table, the same routine. I started taking photos from across the street. Nothing dramatic, just evidence for later use. But the real breakthrough came when I remembered something about Claudia's phone habits. She had always been careless with technology, using the same passwords for everything, syncing all her accounts without thinking about security. For a woman planning to bleed me dry, she had terrible operational security. I accessed her cloud storage from my work computer. What I saw made my stomach turn. There were hundreds of messages between my wife and Dwight, spanning the last 8 months. There were also photos I wish I had never seen. But far more painful than the intimate details were their discussions about me, our marriage, and their joint plans. Claudia had written 3 weeks earlier that Preston was always working and did not notice anything at all. She even joked that she could move in with her lover, and I would just think she was working late at the office. Dwight replied that she should wait until after the holidays. He wanted to let the children have one last peaceful Christmas before their familiar world fell apart. They treated our family like a business asset they were planning to liquidate as soon as the fiscal year ended. The hardest messages were recent, sent just 2 days after I had overheard their conversation at the restaurant. Claudia was worried that I had been acting suspicious the night before and had asked too many questions about her day. She suspected I was finally starting to figure things out. Dwight suggested they speed up their timeline, but my wife said no. She thought I was far too trusting. In her words, if the sky turned green, I would just ask what shade it was. They decided to stick to the original plan. Wait until Daniel's graduation in May, and only then make their move. Divorce for them was like a chess game, and I seemed to them like a player who could not even see the board. I printed out all the evidence, made copies, and hid them in a bank safety deposit box across town. Then I contacted the best attorney in the state, a woman named Rebecca Martinez. She had a reputation for protecting men's assets when their marriages fell apart. After reviewing my materials, Rebecca noted that my wife had made 3 critical mistakes. First, she had documented everything. Second, her decision to wait gave us time to protect my interests. And third, she had underestimated me. The lawyer smiled and promised that when my wife tried to take half of everything, she would be left with nothing but regret. On a Saturday morning in November, I had the most difficult conversation of my life. I invited Claudia's brother, Quentin, to meet me at a small diner on the outskirts of town where no one knew us. Quentin worked as a family therapist. He was 3 years younger than his sister, but infinitely wiser about human nature. In their family, he had always been the level-headed one, capable of condemning a bad act without regard to blood relation. When we settled into a corner booth, he remarked that I looked terrible. I handed him the folder with the correspondence. There were no intimate photos. I did not want to subject him to that, but there were enough facts to understand the scale of what his sister was planning. Quentin read in silence, and with each page his face grew darker. When he finished, he asked how long I had known. I told him I had known for 2 weeks and had been gathering evidence ever since. Claudia's brother admitted that he had noticed some strange behavior from her at family gatherings lately. She seemed distracted and secretive. I said I did not know how to break the news to the children. Quentin offered his help. He understood that Daniel and Iris would need professional support to realize that what was happening was not their fault. We spent the next hour planning. Quentin was to gradually prepare the children for the bad news without revealing all the details just yet. He also agreed to serve as a witness in court. Before I left, I mentioned that I needed to protect my business. Claudia expected to take half of the company, but 63 employees' salaries depended on that enterprise. I could not let her greed destroy their lives. That same day, I met with my lawyer and accountant. We changed the ownership structure, transferring my shares into a trust that was protected from divorce proceedings. It was a completely legal business protection strategy that should have been implemented years ago. By Monday morning, my logistics firm was untouchable. The irony was that for years, my wife had criticized me for being too focused on business, and now that very business acumen would be the cause of her downfall. 3 weeks after the truth came out, I made a decision that changed everything. One Tuesday, Claudia was getting ready for another client meeting, which was actually a breakfast with Dwight. She was humming in the bathroom, carefully applying her makeup, with a level of care she had not shown me in months. She was content and completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. As she left, she casually mentioned she would be home late because of a presentation for a restaurant chain. No such chain existed, and the presentation was just a date with her lover. I calmly replied that I also had late meetings planned. After she drove off, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, thinking about the phone call I was about to make. After this, there would be no turning back. No reconciliation, no counseling. It was a drastic measure, but she had chosen it herself by deciding I was just a walking wallet. I called Rebecca Martinez and told her I was ready to file the papers. I insisted that the documents be served to Claudia at her office, in front of her colleagues. I wanted everyone to know who she really was. The lawyer promised to have everything ready by Thursday. That evening, I made a real dinner for the family. Grilled steaks, roasted vegetables, and homemade mashed potatoes. Daniel was surprised by the feast, but I just made a joke. In reality, this was one of our last normal evenings together, and I wanted it to be memorable. My wife returned at 10:47 p.m., blaming a late meeting. She barely touched her food, constantly distracted by messages on her phone. She thanked me for dinner with a routine phrase, not looking up from her chat with Dwight. I kept a neutral expression, letting her believe she was still in control. After 20 years of marriage, I had become invisible to her, but invisible people notice everything. On Thursday at 2:15 p.m., a court courier delivered the papers to Claudia's office. Rebecca called me immediately to confirm the task was done. At that moment, I was waiting for my son after basketball practice. My phone started blowing up with calls from my wife, but I ignored them. By the time Daniel got in the car, I had 7 missed calls and numerous angry texts. My son noticed that his mother was trying very hard to reach me. I turned my phone off completely and said we would talk to her at home. The drive was tense. Daniel could sense that something serious was happening. When we pulled into the driveway, Claudia's car was already there. She had panicked and left work. I found her in the kitchen. She was pacing back and forth, clutching the legal documents. Her face was red with rage and confusion. She screamed, asking what kind of joke this was. I calmly put my keys on the table and said it was exactly what it looked like. My wife began insisting that I could not file for divorce without having a conversation first, that we had problems that could be solved. I looked at the woman who had spent months planning the destruction of our family and was now pretending to be shocked that I had beaten her to it. I asked her if she was planning to solve our problems together with Dwight. She went pale instantly. She seemed to have forgotten that actions have consequences. When she tried to make excuses, I cut her off. I told her I knew everything about the coffee shop meetings, the messages, and the plan to wait until our son graduated to take half of everything. I knew that she thought I was boring and pathetic, and that Dwight was a real partner. She stood there, unable to say a word, caught completely off guard. Then she suddenly asked where the children were. I replied that Quentin had taken them to his place for the night. Claudia was outraged that I had involved her brother in our personal affairs, but I countered that he had a right to know that his sister was destroying 2 families for a cheap affair. Then she started crying. But it was not genuine emotion. It was just another calculated act, the same old pattern she had probably used to manipulate me for years. "Preston, please," she said, trying to touch my hand. "We can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can get through it together." I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "No, Claudia, we cannot, because this was not a mistake. It was a clear plan. And now I have my own plan." For the first time in our entire marriage, she looked at me with something resembling respect. It was not love or affection, rather an acknowledgement that the man in front of her was no longer the same pushover she had married. She will never look at me the same way again. Watching her realize the reality of her situation, I felt that everything was unfolding exactly as it should. The conversation with Daniel and Iris happened 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, in Quentin's office. I wanted to meet on neutral ground, in a safe place where they could process their emotions without feeling trapped. 17-year-old Daniel sat in the chair closest to me, trying to act grown up, though behind that mask I could see a frightened child. Iris, who was 14, curled up on the couch. She was still young enough to hope that this was all just a terrible misunderstanding. "Kids," I began, "your Uncle Quentin and I need to tell you something about what is happening between me and your mom. Are you getting a divorce?" Daniel asked directly. He had always been straightforward, and I had encouraged that trait in him. Right now it was both helpful and heartbreaking. Yes, I answered. We are getting a divorce. Iris made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Quentin moved closer to her, offering silent support. Why? She asked. I thought we were doing okay. This was the moment I had dreaded most. How do you explain betrayal to a 14-year-old girl without completely destroying her relationship with her mother? Sometimes adults do things that hurt the people they love, I said carefully. Your mom got involved with someone else, and she was making plans that did not include keeping our family together. Daniel's jaw tightened. How long did it last? Several months, I admitted. I knew something was wrong, my son said quietly. She had become different, always distracted and lying about where she was going. Iris was already crying, tears streaming down her face. Does she not love us anymore? She loves both of you very much, I answered, and that was the truth. Whatever Claudia had done to our marriage, she genuinely cared about the children. This is only about her relationship with me, not with you. Where will we live right now? Daniel asked. What will happen to us? You will live with me, I said firmly. In our house, at the same school, with the same friends. I will do everything I can to keep your lives as normal as possible. What about Mom? Iris asked. Your mom will always be your mom, Quentin interjected gently. She will still be part of your lives, just differently than before. We talked for about another hour, trying to answer their questions as honestly as possible. Daniel was angry not only at his mother, but at the whole situation. Iris was confused and hurt, trying to understand how the family she had trusted could fall apart so suddenly. Dad, Daniel said as we were getting ready to leave, I want you to know, I am proud of you for standing up for yourself. Mom treated you badly for months, and I started losing respect for you because you did not do anything about it. His words struck me to my core. My own son had watched me tolerate disrespect and had lost faith in me because of my excessive trust and passivity. I should have acted sooner, I admitted. Maybe, he replied, but you did it when it really mattered. That is all that counts. Iris hugged me tightly as we walked to the car. I love you, Daddy, she whispered. I love you too, sweetheart. Everything will be okay. And for the first time in months, I truly believed that might be true. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized in a courtroom that felt more like a business meeting than the end of an 18-year marriage. Claudia sat at the other end of the room with her lawyer, looking subdued and defeated, a version of her I had never seen before. Her relationship with Dwight had imploded just weeks after the divorce filing. Apparently, when faced with the reality of a real relationship instead of the fantasy of an affair, he decided her life had too much drama. The man who had promised to be her partner disappeared as soon as things got complicated. Claudia's lawyer tried to use every possible angle to get more money, but Rebecca worked flawlessly. The legal protection of the business held up, and the asset transfer was legal and enforceable. In the end, Claudia walked away with her car, her personal belongings, and a modest cash settlement that, if spent carefully, would cover basic expenses for about 2 years. Mr. Wells, the judge said, you are granted primary custody of both minor children with standard visitation rights for Mrs. Wells. The division of assets is approved as agreed upon by both parties. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. I had not wanted our story to end this way, but she had written this ending with her own choices. After the hearing, Claudia approached me in the courthouse hallway. She looked older, worn down by months of legal battles and public humiliation. Preston, she said quietly, I want you to know, I never wanted things to go this far. How far did you plan for them to go? I asked. She could not answer, because we both knew the truth. She had planned to use me until she no longer needed me, and then dispose of me on her terms. The kids miss having you around, I said, and that was only partly true. They were struggling with the divorce, but they were also angry at her for the lies and deceit. Can we try to communicate better for the sake of the future? She asked. For Daniel and Iris? We can try, I agreed. But Claudia, they are not little kids anymore. They understand what happened, and they will need time to trust you again. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I know I destroyed everything good we had. Yes, I said simply. You did. 6 months later, I got a message from Quentin. Claudia had moved to another state, taking a job at a marketing firm in Phoenix. She called the kids every week and visited once a month, but the ease that had once been in their relationship was gone forever. She is trying, Quentin told me during one of our regular meetings, but she is having to build everything from scratch. And that is hard for someone used to being adored. Daniel started his senior year with a new sense of maturity, no longer taking family stability for granted. Iris was seeing a counselor and slowly learning to trust people again. Both children chose to stay with me permanently, refusing shared custody. "You did the right thing, Preston," Quentin said as we watched Daniel's basketball practice. "It was not easy, but you protected them when it mattered most." I nodded, but my attention was on my son, who was driving toward the basket with determination. I realized that he had learned a valuable lesson by watching his father fight for his family. Sometimes the hardest lessons teach us to be stronger. 2 years after the divorce, I sat in the same diner where I had first discussed Claudia's betrayal with Quentin. But this time, I was not here to complain about problems. I was here to celebrate successes. Daniel had been accepted to 3 different colleges, including his dream school. His admissions essay was about resilience and the ability to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. The admissions coordinator noted that it was one of the most mature essays she had ever read from a high school senior. Iris, now 16, was excelling in school and had started dating a boy from her chemistry class. He was a polite kid who looked me in the eye when he spoke and helped clear the table without being asked. She had learned to value respect over charm and substance over smooth talk. My logistics company had expanded into 5 states. Partly it was because I had thrown myself into work during the hardest months of the divorce, but mainly because protecting the business had forced me to innovate, making us more competitive. "You know what I am most proud of?" Quentin asked over a cup of coffee. "The kids never once saw you lose control. Even when everything was falling apart, you stayed focused on being their father." "There were nights when I was on the edge," I admitted, remembering sitting in my truck after tracking Claudia to another secret meeting. I felt like everything I believed in was a lie. "But you did not break. You got angry and then you started acting strategically." And that was the truth. Anger had become fuel, not a tool of destruction. It had given me strength through months of legal proceedings, difficult conversations, and the slow process of rebuilding our family structure. Claudia still lived in Phoenix. She had found a new man, an accountant who seemed stable and kind. The kids had met him during their last visit and said he treated their mother well and did not try to replace their father. "She seems happier," Iris shared after that trip. "More like the mom I remember from early childhood." "That is good," I replied, and I meant it. All the anger I had carried toward Claudia had long since burned out, replaced by indifference and a determination to focus on the future, not the past. Last month, I started dating a new woman named Sarah, who runs a small consulting firm. She is also divorced and raising a teenage daughter. We met at a Chamber of Commerce event, got to talking about the challenges of single parenting, and discovered we had far more in common than we expected. "She is not like Mom," Daniel observed after first meeting Sarah. "More straightforward and less prone to drama." "Is that good or bad?" I asked. "Definitely good," he answered without hesitation. "Drama is highly overrated." Iris agreed with her brother. "Sarah treats you like an equal," she told me. "Mom always acted like she was doing you a favor by being married to you." Out of the mouths of babes. Driving home from the diner that day, I reflected on how much I had changed since that fateful night. That night, I overheard the most terrible words my wife had ever spoken about me. In that moment, I thought my world was ending. It turned out it was only just beginning. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was peaceful. Daniel's car was there. He had returned from his college visit. Iris's bike was leaning against the garage door, meaning she was inside doing homework. My family had become smaller, but it had become much stronger. It was built on truth instead of lies, on respect instead of convenience, and on love that did not require anyone to pretend to be something they were not. 2 years ago, in that restaurant booth, I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the worst thing someone can say about you becomes the most liberating knowledge. Because once you know where you really stand, you can finally decide where you want to go next. I was advised not to come. The warning fell into my mailbox from an anonymous address 3 days before the gala evening. No subject, no signature, just one short message. If you show up, she will lie again. Stay home. You will never know the truth. I read these lines 5 times. I thought it was either someone's prank or someone new had appeared. Someone who noticed what I myself was afraid to admit. Being a coward, I deleted the letter. Then I restored it. I stared at it until my laptop screen went dark. I didn't plan to go. I wasn't on the guest list. Not after last year's events, not after what she did. But that message seemed to crawl under my skin, causing an unbearable itch. In the end, I rented a suit. Not my own. Mine no longer fit, and I had no desire to fix it up. This outfit smelled of someone else's triumph. I arrived at the gala earlier than everyone else to remain unnoticed. I waited outside, watching as one limousine after another pulled up. She got out of the third car. She was wearing a dark blue dress that cost, it seemed, more than my rent for the last 3 months. Her hair was styled, her face beamed with that same smile she rehearsed in front of the mirror. She walked arm in arm with someone else. Not the man who was there before. This companion was older, larger, and clearly richer. I stood in the shadows watching them enter the building like a royal couple. What struck me was that she didn't even hesitate. No glance over her shoulder, no shadow of guilt. She just walked through the glass doors as if the last year never happened, and I never existed in her life. I waited 23 minutes. I know exactly because I kept staring at my phone screen the whole time. Every second felt like betrayal breathing down my neck. Inside, the ballroom was soaked in the smell of money and deceit. Champagne on silver trays, laughter echoing off ceilings that were too high. I didn't belong here, nor did the truth, of which I now had an abundance. I saw her again by the piano. She was laughing, clinking glasses with his glass, whispering something in his ear, touching his chest with her fingers, as if they were rehearsing the next scandal. That was our gesture, a light, almost weightless touch of fingertips. She used to do that when she was proud of me, when she thought no one was watching, when we were still real. I didn't approach her immediately. I circled nearby, appearing at the bar, near the ice sculpture, by the silent auction stands. I wanted her to feel my presence in the hall before she saw me. It worked. She turned around. I will never forget that moment. Her smile froze, her jaw tensed. Her hand slipped from his elbow as if she had been burned. And then came what I was not prepared for. She slowly walked toward me. The space around seemed to shrink, leaving just the two of us. She stopped inches away. Her eyes wide, her gaze soft, like before. She reached out a trembling hand, wanting to touch, to reconnect, to pretend. But I didn't move. I didn't say her name. I just whispered in a voice I barely recognized. Not this time. Never again. I watched her hand fall. The best part, her companion saw all of it. I left without looking back. I heard her quietly call after me, hoping I would turn around. But it was too late. If I had turned, I might have wavered. And she didn't deserve doubts. Not after everything. Walking out into the cold night, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. It wasn't victory or relief, rather an exit from a prolonged lie. As if I had been living inside someone else's fantasy. For the first time, I could breathe my own grief and call it mine. I returned to the apartment I moved into when she needed space to focus on her growth. A cramped box with one bedroom, peeling wallpaper, and a refrigerator humming like a dying animal. It was a step backward in everything except one. This place belonged to me. No polished life for social media, no expensive kitchen appliances I was forbidden to touch. No exquisite glasses I supposedly didn't know how to hold properly. Just a couch, a battered coffee table, and the echo of a man who finally admitted, love shouldn't feel like a punishment. I poured myself cheap liquor, burning my throat and reminding me of my own worthlessness. I opened my laptop. Sleep wouldn't come, my hands still trembling from the weight of realization. That letter still sat in my inbox. If you show up, she will lie again. Now I knew the truth. At least I thought I did. But another message was waiting for me, from a different address. Again, no subject. A short text. Check your phone. Audio, March 3rd. My heart went cold. At first, the date meant nothing. But then I remembered that day Leda came home sick. She said the board meeting was postponed and she needed rest. I made her soup, which she barely touched. I thought she slept all day. When we separated, we didn't delete the shared cloud account. She promised to log out herself, but apparently never did. My phone kept backups of all devices, including hers. A mix of horror and trembling hands led me to the voice memo app. I found a file named Meeting 3 to 3. I shouldn't have pressed play, but I did. First, office noise, keyboard clatter, laughter in the background, rustling papers. Then her voice, clear, confident, unfamiliar. I told him I was sick, she said, followed by a man's laughter. Not Darren, someone else. Footsteps, a door click, silence, and then moans. I dropped my phone. I stared at it like a traitor. I wanted to smash it, scream, punch the wall. But I just sat there, frozen, like a bad actor in a movie I never wanted to be in. What killed me wasn't the sounds, but her words in the breaks. She laughed, saying how trusting I was, how I would believe anything if she made a pained face and complained of a headache. And then the phrase that finally destroyed me: I could be cheating in the next room, and he would still bring me tea. I really did that once when she cried during a video call. I thought I was helping. I closed the app, slammed the laptop shut, but the words rang louder than any recording. The next day, a third letter arrived, with an attached photo, she and that man from the gala. But they weren't alone. With them sat a man I hadn't seen in years, my brother. I stared at the image for 10 minutes without blinking. It was as if the pixels themselves were lying, as if by tilting the screen at the right angle, it would all turn into an innocent scene. But no, Leda in that same blue dress was pressed against the man she clung to like a trophy. And next to her, grinning, sat my brother, molding. We hadn't seen each other for almost a year. We grew apart after our father's funeral. He had always been the golden child, charming, ambitious, and flexible enough in matters of morality to succeed. I was the quiet helper, the one who stayed behind while others moved forward. But I never hated him until this moment. The photo was taken at the restaurant Roses, the same place where Leda and I celebrated our 4th anniversary. She said that place was too expensive for both of us to just go back casually. But she went back, with them. I don't know what hurt more, the dress I helped her zip up slipping off her shoulder, or Molding's hand on the table, too close to hers. He wasn't a random witness to her lies. I needed answers. I started with whoever decided to warn me. I wrote to the anonymous sender, "Who are you?" Silence. 6 hours later, I sent another. "Why are you sending this? What do you want?" Again, nothing. But the next morning, an envelope was taped to my apartment door. No name, no postmark. Inside, a black USB drive and a note in small block letters. "Your marriage was a business deal. Time to see the receipts." My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop. I expected audio or screenshots, but there were security camera recordings. First video, my brother and Leda, 6 months ago, entering a luxury hotel downtown. She in a tracksuit, he in a hoodie and baseball cap, both wearing dark glasses indoors. Very discreet. Time, 2:14 p.m. Tuesday. At that hour, she claimed to be stuck in a meeting with the regional design director. The next file was even worse. Footage from her office. She at her desk. Darren, the one I initially thought of, standing behind her, reading something over her shoulder. She hands him a folder. He kisses her neck. Not shyly, but habitually. She doesn't even flinch. My marriage was not a marriage. It was a performance where I was cast as background furniture. The man who looked reliable enough in photographs but was too quiet to ask unnecessary questions. But the last file finally broke me. It was an audio recording. No date, no context, just Leda's voice on a phone call. "Yes, he's not a threat," she said with a laugh. "He won't leave me. He doesn't even know how to do it. He's the type who will still bring me flowers when I get pregnant by someone else. Trust me, Doyle is pathetic. He's safe. Safe. Pathetic. A convenient landing pad when everything else crumbles." I don't remember closing the laptop. I don't remember pouring myself a drink. I only remember staring at my own reflection on the dark screen and wondering how many more versions of myself I would let her destroy before I stopped calling it love. But that night, for the first time in many months, I did something she never expected from me. I made a plan. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. I just sat with wide open eyes and a numb heart, replaying every memory of her like a crime scene on repeat. Our wedding vows now felt like mockery. Her laughter, late-night talks, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, all of it seemed fake, as if she was just rehearsing a role for the next act. And I was merely a rehearsal, a beta version of the man she really needed. No, the one who could give her what I never had: power. By morning, my anger was gone. I became calculating, calm, and focused. That's what betrayal does to you. When it sinks deep enough, you don't scream. It makes you precise. I started examining bank statements. I still had access to our joint account, which she forgot to close. That's the problem with people who think they're smarter than everyone else. They underestimate how quietly they can be watched. The first thing I noticed was a series of cash withdrawals, always in round amounts at the same ATM, and always during working hours. At first glance, nothing suspicious, until I checked the address. It wasn't near her office, but near Molding's apartment. The next detail, a transfer marked consulting fee, $1,000 every 2 weeks to an account in the name of Wendell Chase. I almost laughed when I saw it. She really thought I was that stupid. Wendell Chase, that was the name of our childhood cat. He died when I was 11, but she remembered that name and used it, thinking I would never notice. I traced the routing number. Guess who it belonged to? My brother. She was paying him for what? For staying quiet? For being a front? Or something worse? Were they planning all of this together from the very start? I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the screen, and something inside me changed. I was no longer going to be a fool. Not a doormat, not a sad husband begging for crumbs of attention. No. If I was going down, I would take the truth with me and drag them out into the light they had been hiding from for years. So I started making calls. I contacted someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 10 years, an old university friend named Sterling, who now worked as an investigator at a private firm. He was in my debt, and for the first time, I was ready to collect. I sent him everything: the bank transfers, the audio files, the photos, and even the anonymous letters. I told him I didn't care how deep it all went. I needed every name, every date, and every secret. Sterling didn't hesitate. "Are you sure you're ready for what I'll find?" he asked. "No," I answered, "but I still need to hear it." That same day, I received a message from Leda. Short, cold, almost mechanical. "Are you okay? Heard you were at the gala. Can we talk?" Talk? About what? I almost deleted it, but something stopped me. An inner voice told me to reply just enough to lure her into a trap. I wrote back, "Soon. Not yet." It was vague enough to make her wonder, and that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted her to be nervous, to lose balance, to guess what I knew and who else might know. By the end of the week, Sterling sent the first report. I opened the PDF file, sitting in my car parked outside that very building I once helped her move into. The headline was simple: Subject, Leda Hallberg, Internal Risk Assessment. The content read like a spy novel. It turned out that during our marriage, she had not one, but 3 separate affairs. Darren was just the latest. With Molding, she had been involved for over 2 years, and the third name literally knocked the air out of my lungs. Her direct supervisor, Susan Atwell, a married woman with 2 children. I didn't know what hurt more: the fact of the betrayal or the realization that she had been living an entirely different life, hidden behind masks and mirrors I never managed to see through. But the report didn't end there. On the last page was a still from a traffic camera. Leta at 3:47 a.m., driving alone out of a private medical facility. The date, 2 weeks before the gala. And under the photo, a line highlighted in bold red font: Subject discharged from reproductive health clinic. Procedure unknown. Further investigation recommended. That was when I realized she was planning a future without me, a future that might have already arrived. At first, I didn't even understand what a visit to such a clinic meant. My mind was too foggy to connect the dots. I read the last line of the report again and again. Procedure unknown. Something about it felt wrong. For years, she never brought up having children. On the contrary, she once said that bringing a child into our chaos would be cruel. That, of course, hurt. I had always imagined that one day we would become parents, but I respected her decision. Or at least, I convinced myself of that. Now I wondered whether that "we" ever included me at all. I tried to calm down, to think logically. Maybe she went to support a friend. Maybe it was a routine exam. Maybe there was nothing sinister about it. But I knew the truth. People don't sneak out to a private clinic at 3:47 a.m. in sunglasses and a hoodie if they have nothing to hide. I sent Sterling a follow-up message, asking him to dig deeper. He replied within the hour, saying he had already submitted a request for the internal logs. This might take a day or two, he warned. Patience. That's what I lacked. I didn't want to wait anymore. While I waited for an answer, I made another decision. I called Molding. He didn't pick up. I called again. Straight to voicemail. Then I did something I swore I would never do. I drove to his house. He lived in one of those modern glass towers that scream status, but feel cold inside. I stood in front of his door for a full minute before knocking. I heard movement inside, hurried, panicked, and then silence. When the door finally opened, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. A wrinkled shirt, disheveled hair, a guilty look. Doyle, he said, swallowing hard. This is unexpected. You'd better sit down, I said, walking past him before he could stop me. Inside, it smelled of aftershave and secrets. I didn't waste time. You took money from her, I stated. You lied to me. How long did this go on? His mouth opened and closed. No defense. Just a shadow of guilt on his face that confirmed everything before he even spoke. It's not what you think, he began. I held up the USB drive. No, because this says otherwise. Molding sank onto the couch as if his legs had given out. I didn't mean to hurt you, man. She offered, said you wouldn't understand, that she just needed a clean way out. I laughed, actually laughed. Clean? You call this clean? You were my brother, and you took her money to help prepare my replacement. She said you were spiraling, that you weren't stable anymore. Said you were just holding her back. I froze. The words spiraling were not accidental. They were scripted. She had said the same thing in the audio recording. He was quoting her word for word. I stood there with ragged breath and a tight chest. Then I asked the one question I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. Is she pregnant? Molding slowly looked up. I don't know, Doyle, but if she is, the child isn't yours. After those words, I said nothing. I just stood and looked at my brother as if I saw right through him, as if he was no longer a real person, just another crack in the life I thought I had built. He didn't try to explain further, didn't apologize again. He just sat there, hunched over, avoiding my gaze, probably realizing that this conversation couldn't end without loss. I left his apartment in silence. Back home, I checked my email. Sterling had sent an update, a short message with 2 attachments. I hope you're ready for this. The first file was a document from the clinic, partially redacted, but with enough visible data to confirm my worst fears. Lita hadn't just gone for consultations. She had undergone an IVF procedure. The procedure date, 10 days before the gala. And the emergency contact listed was Molding Halberg. They didn't even try to hide it. But the second attachment finally destroyed me. A scanned questionnaire with a handwritten note from Lita to the clinic administrator, asking under no circumstances to contact her husband. He is not aware of this process. She even signed it. There was her handwriting, confident and firm, as if it were all just part of a business deal. I sat in the darkness, the screen burning my eyes, while inside I was being emptied piece by piece. She was planning the birth of a child, not with me and not even for me. And all this time, while remaining my lawful wife, coming home to the man who washed her clothes and bought her favorite cream, she was building a future behind my back with my own brother. She did her best to make sure I never found out the truth, but someone wished otherwise. Someone started feeding me clues. This person knew everything and wanted this lie to burn to the ground. So I decided to act. I sent Leda a message. Let's talk tomorrow in a public place. She replied in less than a minute. Yes, please. No hesitation, no extra conditions. That meant she was either scared or ready to finally settle the past. Either way, I was no longer going to play the part of the one chasing after her. If she thought she could walk away from this unscathed, she was about to learn something new about the man she had underestimated for so long. The next morning, I walked into the cafe feeling like I was walking into a courtroom. She was already there, sitting by the window, sipping her expensive latte as if it were the most ordinary Wednesday. When she saw me, her face flickered for just a moment. Then she gave me that same soft smile she always used to end an argument without apologizing. "Doyle," she said, "I'm glad you came." I sat down slowly, placed a small envelope on the table, and met her eyes. "You're going to tell me the truth," I said in a low voice, "or I will show your entire company what's in here." She blinked, her fingers freezing on her cup. "What is that?" she asked. "Evidence," I answered. "Every lie, every transaction, every voice memo, every visit to the clinic. Your manager, Darren, molding, absolutely everything." She looked like she might be sick. And then for the first time, she dropped the mask. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. I smiled. "Nothing. I'm taking everything anyway." For a while she was silent. Her hands trembled slightly as she pushed her coffee aside, as if it had suddenly become an obstacle. I could see behind her outwardly calm face that her mind was racing, calculating options, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. But it was too late. She had underestimated me for too long, and she simply didn't know how to talk to me without manipulation. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she finally whispered, barely audible. "It just got too complicated." I nearly laughed. Complicated? That's what she called secret visits to a reproductive clinic while still married to me? Or bribing my brother for silence? Or the affairs with her boss and his supervisor? Or the plans to raise a child with someone who wasn't even in her life a year ago? "I'm not here for reconciliation," I said, keeping my tone calm. "I'm not going to fight. I'm just being polite and letting you know what's coming." Her eyes narrowed. "What exactly?" "Your job," I answered. "It's in the past. Your web of secrets is torn. I sent copies of all the materials to Susan's husband and Darren's wife, to HR, the board of directors, and Molding's firm as well. The calls will start coming to you within the hour." I expected panic, screams, maybe even pleading. But instead, she laughed quietly and bitterly. "You think that's everything?" she asked. "You think you see the whole picture?" I looked at her, confused. "I went to the clinic not for Molding," she said, looking me straight in the eye. "And not for Darren, and not for anyone else you think you figured out." She leaned closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "I went there alone." My heart slowed. "What?" She smirked. "I used your name, Doyle. You were listed as my husband, so they turned a blind eye. But the sample, the donor profile, everything was anonymous. You were never part of that plan. You were just a cover." This hit me with incredible force. She had used my identity to create something I had no connection to. Legally and ethically, I didn't even understand what that meant. But it felt deeper than just betrayal. It felt like theft. I had been erased from my own story and used as a prop in her script. "Why?" was all I could ask. "Because you were reliable," she answered, tilting her head slightly. "Predictable. You didn't ask too many questions. You were the perfect alibi." I felt something break inside my chest. It wasn't anger or sadness, just an empty, painful disappointment from having given so many years of my life to someone who saw me only as a shield or a temporary stand-in. "I hope it was worth it," I said. She nodded once. "Yes." But then I stood up and delivered the final blow. "You know, the donor wasn't anonymous. I tracked him down." This shook her. "You covered your tracks poorly," I continued, my voice now firm. "You chose someone you thought was influential, successful, and genetically superior." I leaned toward her, mirroring her movement. "But do you know who else he is? A convicted criminal from another state. Identity theft. You really should have checked his background." Her lips parted, and she turned pale. "You can't prove that," she said, but her voice no longer held confidence. I placed a copy of the donor records on the table right next to her untouched coffee. "You're going to lose everything, Leda," I said quietly. "And this time, I won't be there to help you fix it." After that, I walked out. I didn't look back. It has been 9 months since I left that cafe. I remember what the air felt like outside. fresh, sharp, and clean, as if a weight had been lifted from my lungs that I didn't even know existed. For the first time in years, I didn't feel crushed by someone else's plans. I was myself again. After that day, a lot changed. Leda's downfall was quiet but thorough. She wasn't fired instantly, but when the board of directors reviewed the reports and the legal complications regarding the unauthorized use of family data to access medical services, they launched an investigation. Susan resigned to focus on her family. Darren left under a mutual agreement that became popular, and Molding lost his consulting license. It turns out when you take money under false names and violate a host of ethical codes, people stop trusting you. She tried to call me once, just once. I didn't pick up, and the call went to voicemail. Her voice was quiet and broken, lacking any of her usual rehearsed confidence. She said she didn't know how everything got so tangled, that it wasn't supposed to end this way, and that she hoped one day I could forgive her. I didn't delete that message, but I didn't reply either. It just stayed there, quietly gathering dust, like everything else she left behind. But this story is no longer about her. A few weeks after everything collapsed, Sterling, the friend who helped me get to the truth, invited me to a small gathering. Nothing fancy, just a quiet evening with people who didn't know my story and didn't look at me like a broken man. I almost said no, but I forced myself to go. There, I met Ira. She wasn't loud. She didn't dazzle with fake smiles or wear perfect dresses. She brought a tray of homemade lemon cookies and accidentally spilled iced tea on my shoes. But when she apologized, she looked me straight in the eyes. Really looked, and for some reason, I didn't look away. That evening, we talked for 4 hours straight. The strangest part is that I didn't tell her a single word about Leda. Not then, not in the following weeks. Because for the first time in my life, I wanted something to begin without pain and without old scars being the main topic of conversation. Today, I work in a different city, at a smaller firm with fewer people. Now I walk to work. My apartment is modest, but it smells of me. Not the cologne I never wore, nor the perfume I never liked. Just coffee, books, and peace. Ira and I are still taking things slowly. Now she knows the truth. Not all the details, but enough. And she has never looked at me with pity, only with understanding. Sometimes in the evenings, when it's quiet around us, she just takes my hand without saying a word. And that is enough. Last week we walked past a bridal shop. She stopped to admire a dress in the window. I didn't panic or freeze. I just smiled and asked if she liked the lace or the silk. She blushed. I don't know where this road leads, but I do know that I am finally walking it with someone who sees me as a person, not as a temporary replacement or a backup plan, but as a human being and a partner. If you are currently in that dark place and think it will never get better, know that it will. One breath at a time, one truth at a time. She smirked when I suggested we go to the park. Saturday, clear sky. That kind of day when an ordinary bench and a hot pretzel feel like a full-blown mini vacation. I was tying my shoelaces by the door, and my wife was scrolling through photos on her phone. Plates of late breakfast, rooftop views, smiling faces with fake eyelashes. The park. She lifted her gaze as if I had just made a good joke. That's sweet, Nate, but I'm not in high school anymore. That sort of thing doesn't match my level. I straightened up, leaving my laces dangling. Your level. Babysitters, strollers, geese. She waved her hand dismissively. You do understand how that looks. I can't show up there in a blazer and pretend I'm impressed by a pond. I was hoping for a walk where no audience is required. She laughed again. You really don't understand anything. If I had known then how much that laugh would cost, I would have saved the money for the pretzel and the next 6 weeks' worth of patience. I hung the keys back on the hook. Fine, I replied. No park. What level are you on today? Brittany sent a message. There's a tasting downtown and we should go. But please, no awkward speeches about my husband not drinking alcohol. Just let me enjoy the moment. I'm driving, I reminded her. That's what taxis are for, she snapped, already heading to the mirror to fix her lipstick. And change your shirt. If we run into people we know, I don't want you looking like a kids' league coach. I looked at my dark blue polo and clean jeans. Got it. I'll burn the suburban spirit out of my wardrobe. Don't be dramatic. Something that looked like a smile flashed across her face, but it wasn't meant for me. 5 minutes, I changed clothes and made a mental note. She said it out loud for the first time. My level. There's always a first time. You can step over it and pretend nothing happened, or you can draw the line where it all began. That day, I hadn't drawn mine yet. We never made it to the tasting. Traffic turned the highway into a massive parking lot. For 20 minutes, she posted stories about the atmosphere, which, as far as I could tell, consisted solely of our car's hood and the brake lights ahead. When she finally put her phone down, she suggested we discuss our summer plans. What plans exactly? Real plans, not that camping trip you mentioned. That was fun, but I like camping and I don't like sweating on purpose. She lowered the sun visor and went back to studying her reflection. Brittany's company is renting a house on the coast for a week, a mansion by the water, a private chef, a driver, all that. We could go. That's the kind of environment that suits us. Us? I leaned my elbow against the door. How much does it cost? Not your favorite number. What is my favorite number? Cheap? She didn't look away from the mirror. I'm serious, Nate. I can't be the one who never shows up in public. People notice. And it reflects on you too, you know? Really? I asked. If your wife looks like she's bending over backwards while you pinch every penny, no one will take you seriously. Apparently, I missed the meeting where renting oceanfront houses became a key performance indicator. You can be sarcastic, she said, or you can listen. We're not kids just starting out anymore. You have a real job. Your company values you. Stop pretending we're barely making ends meet. I'm not pretending. I'm managing a budget. Right, she replied, cutting back my life to make your ego feel bigger. We spent the rest of the drive in a silence that wasn't peaceful. She stopped talking. I stopped pretending it was about summer. It was never about summer. It was about gravity. Who orbits whom? When we got home, she immediately buried herself in her phone. Laughter came from the living room, but it wasn't meant for me. I stood in the kitchen, leaning on the counter, looking at the wall calendar. Birthdays, dentist appointments, my project deadlines, and a week at the beach circled in her handwriting with a smiley face added. All right, if we're talking about levels, I'll set my own. I printed out 2 sheets and put them on the table. When she finally came into the room, I slid them over to her. What's this? New rules, I said. 2 budgets instead of 1. You'll see the separation. The joint account stays for household needs. Personal expenses, yours and mine, are now paid from our own accounts. No more gray areas and last-minute surprises. Her eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? You want a house by the water, and I want a roof that doesn't leak. Both desires are reasonable, but only one is mandatory. I tapped the paper with my finger. Numbers don't care about social media status updates. I'm not a teenager asking daddy for money. Good, I replied. Then it shouldn't be hard for you to stand on your own 2 feet. I'm not cutting off your support. I'm acting like an adult. You're punishing me for not wanting to sit on a park bench. I'm adapting to the circumstances, I said. When the environment changes, you have to adapt. You declared that your level has changed, and I heard you. She stared at the printouts. I can't believe you're doing this without consulting me. I'm consulting you right now. We'll freeze the joint card until we both agree to use it. We'll set up weekly check-ins, 10 minutes max for household planning, and this Saturday I'm helping a friend with his garage. You'll manage just fine at the tasting without me. She let out a short laugh. You think you can just decide everything on your own? I can decide the degree of my involvement, I said. That's all. You'll probably look ridiculous, but at least I'll sleep well. She grabbed her phone. I need air. Take as much as you want. She left, slamming the door loudly. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A screenshot from a group chat arrived. One of her friends wrote, "Tell him to stop being so down to earth." Another chimed in, "Men need to be trained." Then a message from my wife. This is what I have to deal with. I looked at my coffee and didn't reply. People were watching us, and apparently I had given them a reason for a spectacle. By Monday, I had transferred my paycheck to another account, canceled a couple of automatic payments, and moved the beach house inquiry to the non-essential expenses column. That evening, she walked around the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets noisily, as if the sound could shift my boundaries. So this is it, she said. Spreadsheets, Nate. This is me bringing clarity. It feels cold. Because numbers don't care whether you're impressed or not. You're punishing me. I'm protecting us, I replied, from uncontrolled expense inflation. She rolled her eyes. That language is just unbearable. You liked it when those calculations helped us get approved for a mortgage. That was completely different. Everyone always says that, I replied. She fell silent. 2 moments passed. Brittany invited us to her rooftop on Thursday. There will be friends of her husband. Useful connections. I told her we'd stop by. I'm not going to participate in that performance, I said, but I'll come for 1 hour. No talk about finances. Just be yourself, she said. That's exactly what I plan to do, I replied. On Thursday, the rooftop terrace looked like a catalog of status symbols. Glass railings, a hired bartender, conversations that resembled official press releases. I recognized Brittany from photos. Tall, polished woman with a voice that could slice a bagel without a knife. Her husband, Hunter, had a handshake of a man who spends much more time networking than keeping his promises. Finally, Brittany exclaimed, exchanging air kisses with my wife. We were just discussing your summer. Are you joining us at the beach, or will we have to kidnap you? My wife tilted her head, looking at me. We're discussing logistics, and she said, You know how men are? Brittany smiled at me as if I'd been caught stealing office pens. Logistics, translating to human. He gets nervous around beautiful things. Don't worry, Hunter said, slapping me on the shoulder like an old buddy. We'll make a man out of you yet. I sipped my water. I'm housebroken, I said. I bring my own ice. A guy in a pastel shirt cut into the conversation. My wife had the same problem, he said to my wife. She had to drag me up a level while I kicked and screamed. You'll get him there too. My wife laughed along with them. He means well. He just doesn't understand how it looks from the outside. How it looks from the outside, I repeated. Brittany leaned closer. If you two want to get into certain circles, you have to look like you belong there. It's not rocket science. I put my glass down. I'll pass on circles where buying a sandwich requires someone's permission, I said. Nate, my wife said with a clear warning in her voice. I looked at her. You said it yourself. Be yourself. This is me. Brittany smiled too widely. This is fun. He's so down to earth. Salt of the earth, Hunter added. Salt isn't a personality trait, my wife snapped, and everyone laughed as if on a rehearsed cue. Something important, I said in an even voice. A couple of boundaries while we're here. I turned to my wife but didn't lower my voice. No more jokes about me being greedy or cheap. Not in private, not in public. I'm not going to play the clown. Second, our finances are now separate until we decide what works for both of us. I will not fund status projects. If you want them, pay for them from your personal budget. Third, don't sign me up for events without my consent. Ask first. If I say yes, good. If no, that decision is final. Silence fell over the group, as if someone had suddenly turned off the music. Brittany recovered first. Whoa, someone's been to a psychology seminar. Hunter raised his palms. Hey, live your truth. My wife's smile became strained. We'll talk later. No need, I said. It's already decided. She looked around, assessing who was on her side. Brittany saved the moment. Why don't we take a group photo? She chirped. You know, while the sun hasn't set yet. I stepped out of the frame. You guys look great, I said. I'll pass. Oh, come on, Nate, my wife said. Absolutely not, I said. I felt the atmosphere turn cold instantly. Suit yourself. In the elevator, she didn't look at me. In the car, she said, You humiliated me. I stopped a habitual pattern, I replied. If that felt like humiliation, maybe the pattern itself was ugly. You could have said that to me in private. I did. You laughed. So I said it out loud where your laughter had an audience. You're petty. I'm precise. She turned away to the window. Because of you, it seems like I'm married beneath my level. Careful, I said. You're confusing your feelings with facts. She fell silent. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. A message from Brittany. I don't want to interfere, but she deserves better. Think about your image. I deleted it. On Friday morning, my wife brought me coffee in bed. That was an unusual gesture. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching me taste the drink. Good, hot, I said. I've thought about what you said, she began. Maybe I got carried away. I just care that we can be proud of ourselves. Pride and price are not synonyms. I knew that. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. What if we pick something more modest? Not the beach house, but something local. A weekend at the lake. We could invite people. Or not. I don't know. I watched her carefully. A quiet voice. Open palms. It would have been easy to let that be enough. Before that had worked. But not now. We can go to the lake, I replied. But not for the sake of image. If we go, it's only because we actually want to. And on our terms. No committees and no group votes. I'm not spending Saturday auditioning for friendships. Deal, she agreed quickly. I'll plan something simple. I'll be the judge of simple, I said. Send me the options and the bills before you buy anything. Of course, she reached for my shoulder, then pulled back, as if unsure it was allowed. Thank you for listening. She left, humming something. 10 minutes later, an email arrived in my inbox from a spa I'd never heard of. We look forward to welcoming you for a transformative weekend. Deposit received. I forwarded it to her with a single line. This is your definition of simple? She replied that the booking was preliminary. If I don't do it now, we'll lose the spot. I walked into her home office. She was on a headset, laughing with someone. When she saw me, she raised a finger. Wait. I leaned against the doorframe. When she finished the call, she took off the headphones and smiled as if the scent of coffee still lingered in the room. Before you start, I can cancel it all. Cancel it, I said. Right now. But know this. The deposit will come out of your personal account. We will not be financing your panic. Panic? Panic over the possibility of looking like a loser, I clarified. She stared at me. I said I'll cancel it. Do it, I said, and walked out. 10 minutes later, she sent a screenshot of the cancellation and a message. Are you happy now? I didn't reply. I wasn't aiming for happy. I was aiming for clarity. The next week dragged painfully. She cooled down. No more jabs or talk about status. She was polite, almost gentle. She cooked dinner twice more than in the entire previous month. She asked about my project. One evening, she even sat next to me on the couch and watched a game without commenting. Midweek, she suggested, let's go to the park on Sunday before it gets too crowded. I raised an eyebrow. Your level of expectations has dropped. Maybe I was acting like a spoiled brat, she smiled. You have the right to say, I told you so once. Use it wisely. I said nothing. We walked through the park. Everything was fine. She told me that Brittany's group was spending too much, and she was tired of it. She took my hand like in the old days. When a woman with a stroller ran past, she didn't even flinch. For 1 hour, I allowed myself to breathe easy. On the way home, she asked, do you feel better? I think we can live normally without any filters. Okay, I squeezed her hand, because I need your help with something important. There it was, the other shoe. It always drops. What is it? A kitchen renovation, she said too casually. I consulted a specialist. He's great. It's not cheap, but it'll significantly increase the home's value. Resale, prestige, all at once. How much is not cheap? She named a sum that could feed a small town. No, I answered immediately. Just like that? It's an investment. It's a decoration, I argued, for a life you think you need to prove. I shouldn't have invited you to the park, she snapped. It confused you. You decided I'm giving up on standards. Standards and appetites are not the same thing. She crossed her arms. You make me feel worthless when you say no. Notice how often that happens to people who are used to hearing only yes, I replied. It's not personal. She started pacing the room. I can contribute from my budget. I won't stop you, I said, but that's not partnership. Partnership is when two people respect each other enough to say no without subsequent punishment. She laughed sharply. You love giving lectures. I love balance, I countered. And speaking of balance, tomorrow evening I'll be at the workshop with Dave, finishing the shelves. Don't wait for me. I have a dinner planned with Michelle and Jay. Enjoy your meal. I'll order takeout. She stopped pacing. They're expecting both of us. They'll be disappointed. You're being difficult on purpose. No, I said. I'm done with those auditions. She shook her head and grabbed her phone. A minute later, a message came from Michelle. We'll miss you tonight. We'll still talk to her about the kitchen. Maybe we can convince you later. I turned my phone face down. At the workshop, Dave, with a gray beard and hands like sandpaper, handed me a drill. You look like you'd rather have a ticket out of this town. I set a boundary, I told him. She's not thrilled. Nobody applauds while sitting on the fence, he noted, but it keeps the cows out of the field. We worked. In the middle of it, my wife sent a message. Michelle's guy will do it cheaper if we agree right now. I put my phone in my pocket. 20 minutes later, another one. Why aren't you answering? Everyone says you're just being stubborn to get your way. We'll talk when you get home. When I arrived, every light was on like a stage. She sat at the table with a spreadsheet that looked nothing like mine. Sit down, she commanded. I'm fine standing. Fine, she tapped the paper. I found a way to make the renovation affordable. We can put it on the joint credit card. If you redirect your 401k contributions for 1 year, we'll cover it all. No, don't answer like a robot. I'm answering like an adult, I said. We're not turning our kitchen into a billboard. You're insufferable. I'm consistent, I clarified. She threw her pen down hard. You know what? Michelle is right. It's your mindset. You like being small. It makes you feel safe. I like being solvent, I replied. It helps me sleep better. She stood up. You're dragging me down. And you're mistaking me for a ladder, I countered. Her smile was joyless. I have options, Nate. I believe you. I could be with someone who understands the value of things. Try being with someone who understands you, I said. That might help. She stepped closer. You're so sure of yourself. That's the only thing I fully own. She leaned in, her eyes shining with that energy I saw every time she won at social games. You do know I can find a replacement in 5 minutes. I held her gaze. Of course, I said. Start looking. I've had enough. The smirk vanished. Her eyes widened and then darkened. She wasn't ready for calm agreement. She brought a match to where sprinklers are installed. What did you say? You heard me. I looked at the clock. Time's ticking. You'll need time to pack. You won't find a replacement for me in my house. Leave. You're joking, she said, but her voice lost its height. No, I replied, already heading to the bedroom closet. I took a suitcase from the top shelf and put it on the bed. The essentials first, shoes, makeup, charger. I'll get your coat. She followed me, then blocked the way to the dresser. You're cruel. I'm perfectly clear, I said. You crossed the only line that mattered. You're exaggerating. You threatened me with a replacement, I reminded her. I'm not competing for the right to live my own life. I didn't mean that. That's exactly what you said, I interrupted. I can negotiate many things, but not respect. She pointed at the door. I pay for things around here too. And you'll take your things with you, I replied. I'm not kicking you out. I'm kicking the arrogance out to the street. You're unbelievable. Pack, I repeated. She didn't move. I opened drawers and folded her things into neat stacks. She started talking again. First insults, then rewriting history, then new grievances. I didn't answer. Folded, zipped, carried. In the kitchen, I put her new favorite mugs on the counter so she would take them. I unplugged her hairdryer, coiled the cord, and put it next to the suitcase. She accused. I kept packing. She sobbed. I rolled the luggage to the door. After 2 hours, everything that belonged to her and wasn't attached to the house fit into 2 suitcases and 3 bags. I opened the door. You won't do this, she whispered. Already did, I replied. You'll regret it. I'm not prone to regret. I'm prone to sleeping well. The neighbor across the hall came out to take out the trash. He froze at our doorstep. Good evening, I said. Hey, he muttered, backing away as if he'd walked onto a set he didn't want to see. She tried a different approach. If you throw me out, we're done. I nodded. Yes, and you won't find better. I'm not looking, I said. I'm cleaning house. You're not as strong as you think you are. Stronger than I used to be, I replied. That's it. She pulled the suitcases out. I watched her walk down the hallway. For a moment, she turned around, expecting the old me to call her back. But I said nothing. She left. The elevator swallowed her rage, carrying her down floor by floor. I locked the door and pressed my palms against the cool wood. No speeches, no dramatic music. Just silence. Real silence. The next morning, I filed the papers. No fuss. I told my boss I needed an hour in the middle of the day. He nodded as if he'd been waiting for me to show some backbone outside of spreadsheets. On the second day, she called. The first call, I answered. She was crying. "You threw me out," she began. "I just stepped out of your game," and I replied. "I didn't mean that. You meant power, not words. The result is the same. We can fix this. We can end this honestly. That is the fix." "So this is it?" "This is it." The second call came in the afternoon. She was angry. "I said something stupid. Everyone says stupid things." "Not everyone says things like that," I countered. "Do you want me to beg?" "I want silence," I said, and hung up. The third call came almost at midnight. "I can't sleep." "I slept well," I replied. "Take care of yourself." She started sending messages. Streams of text, photos from last year's party, a selfie in the park from 2 days earlier. The caption, "Does this mean nothing to you?" I blocked her number. She switched to email. I set up a filter, sending her emails to a folder I never opened. Then she started showing up. Morning, afternoon, once even at the workshop. She walked in while Dave and I were cutting boards. Dave looked at me, then at her. "I need to talk," she said. "You need to respect boundaries," I replied. "Just 5 minutes." "You had years." Dave wiped his hands on a rag. "I'll be in the back," he said. But he didn't go far, staying within earshot. "Good. Witnesses are medicine." She lowered her voice. "I'm embarrassed. Are you happy?" "No, I'm at peace. You made a mistake. I made a choice. You think I'm ending a marriage over one sentence. But I'm stopping a pattern that pretended to be a joke, a standard, or a goal. Call it what you want. I'm done." She blinked. "If we work on this..." "I already worked. Alone." She clenched her jaw. "You'll change your mind." "No." She turned to leave, but stopped, trying another angle. "I talked to Michelle. She thinks you're punishing me for outgrowing you, and I think you're a loser, and losers hire narrators." I told her to leave. She left. Dave came back. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than last month. Want coffee?" "Yeah." That weekend she tried softness. She came to the house with a pie and a photo album I hadn't seen in years. She waited on the steps. "I made this," she said, holding up the pie like a trophy. "I know you like it." "I like boundaries more," I replied. "Please," she said. "Just one conversation at the table." I opened the door just wide enough to take the pie, then handed it back. "Don't make a habit of this. This is not a negotiation space." She stared at the pie. For a second, I almost took it just to not stand in the doorway, like in a bad TV show. But I stepped back. "That's on your conscience," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. "And I like the view." She bit her lip. Half old trick, half genuine hurt. I didn't move. She turned and walked down the steps without looking back. She wrote from other numbers. I blocked those too. Once she came to my gym. I was on a rowing machine with headphones on. She stood in front of me until I took them off. "Enough," she said. "You've proven you're right." "This isn't proof," I replied. "This is a rule." "You're cruel," she said. "Strong," I corrected. The manager glanced our way. A few regulars watched. I raised my voice just enough to be heard. "You need to leave. I asked you not to come here. If you continue, I'll have to formally notify the management that you're banned from approaching me here." She turned red. "God, you're so dramatic." "I'm precise," I said, and put my headphones back on. The manager walked over and quietly escorted her out. The glances in the gym went back to screens and mirrors. I finished my workout. Weeks passed. The paperwork moved forward. She appeared less and less. Our mutual acquaintances tried to intervene. Brittany posted about people outgrowing situations with a photo of seafoam. Michelle sent me heart and prayer hands emojis. I didn't reply. Dave and I finished the shelves. I slept well. After a month, it was over. No fireworks, just signatures and key exchanges. I put her set of keys in a padded envelope and left it with the building manager. He nodded as if he'd seen this movie before. "Sure you don't want to keep a spare?" he asked. "I'm sure." On the last day, I cleaned the house. The place felt more spacious and quieter. Mine. I took the calendar off the wall. No more smiley faces over other people's plans. The phone was quiet, as if it had finally learned its duties. By then, rumors reached me through the usual channels, clicks and whispers. Someone said she'd moved back to her parents, 2 hours away. Another said the beach house crowd had moved on without her. A third claimed she was working on herself, a noble way of saying nothing worked out. I didn't check. I didn't need a timeline. Meanwhile, I lived, replaced a burnt-out bulb on the porch, bought a used pickup truck, powerful enough to haul lumber without asking anyone for favors. I stopped pretending I liked velvet rope places and fell in love with my own porch at sunset. Fixed Mrs. Lamb's gate next door because she'd been asking her nephew for months and he kept forgetting. And I met someone, not like a fairy tale, but in the hardware aisle, arguing with a kid about screw sizes while we both held the same box. Her name is Claire. She's a nurse with a sharp mind, laughs without checking who's watching. We ran into each other again 2 weeks later at a taco stand. This time I bought her dinner because I wanted to, not to prove anything. We talk like adults who have already paid for their mistakes. On the third date, I told her the short version of my story. She didn't flinch, asked only one question. What did you learn? That attention is not the same as respect, I said, and that I can say no without blowing up the building. She nodded. Useful. Let's go slow. No declarations, no deadlines. She sees me, the good parts and the difficult ones. When she texts, it's not to score points. She asks, want to take a walk? Sometimes we end up in the park. I bring pretzels. Every now and then, someone mentions my ex. She moved back home. She's having some kind of reboot. Looks great, but seems tired. I nod. I don't ask. The story ended where it was supposed to. That night when I packed her things after the elevator doors closed, I stood in the hallway and said one phrase into the emptiness. The clock is still ticking. It was no longer about her. It was about my time, my life. For the years spent auditioning, there is no refund. You just stop showing up to the castings. You start living at your own level. It's simple, quiet, honest, and fully paid for. Now I'm not chasing anything. I keep the house clean. I show up to work on time. I sleep. Claire texts me, you okay? And I reply, yeah. I keep the promises I made to myself. I look at the calendar and see my handwriting, not someone else's idea of who I should be. And if someone leans across the table at me again and says, you know, I can find a replacement in 5 minutes, I won't pack their bags. I'll just stand up, leave my coffee hot, and let the clock speak for me. Your effort was not wasted. When I crossed the threshold of the house, she didn't even lift her eyes. Her elbow rested on the countertop, and her thumb habitually scrolled through the feed on her phone. It seemed I was for her nothing more than an accidental draft, not a husband. With a short gesture, she pointed at the stove, tossing out that dinner was ready. I'm glad to see you too, I replied, hanging the keys on the hook. Thick steam rose from the pot. Inside was chicken with rice. No set table, not a single question about how my workday had gone. There was nothing new in this, but right at that moment, the silence became deafening. If only I could have foreseen where it would all lead, I would have definitely taken a picture of that pot. Back then, it seemed completely harmless, but in reality, it became the first warning sign. I ate standing up, listening to her mobile device emit endless notification sounds. On her face was frozen that same absent expression that I had begun to truly hate. Her eyes were glued to the screen, her body was here, but she herself was infinitely far away. I set my fork aside. Maybe you could sit down and eat properly, I asked. She replied that she had already eaten and felt completely exhausted. To my logical question about the reasons for such fatigue, she blinked as if I had shown unprecedented rudeness. Work, you know, came the brief answer. Work? Oh, of course. I silently rinsed my plate and wiped the kitchen table. She, meanwhile, had moved to the sofa, and the light from the display lit up her face. 10 minutes later, I made another attempt to establish contact. I suggested going to the movies on Saturday, noting that we hadn't gone out anywhere in a long time. She again didn't look up from her activity, informing me that Saturday was fully booked for her. She was meeting Nora and her friends. Then I suggested booking a table for a late breakfast on Sunday, but she cut me off, saying she wasn't hungry. Tucking her legs under the blanket, she added that I shouldn't be putting her on my schedule, since she wasn't my client. I couldn't help but note that if she were my client, I would be paying her much more attention. This comment finally made her look at me. Her gaze was cold and empty. She accused me of being overly dramatic or excessively observant. At that moment, her phone vibrated again. She smiled at the screen, but not at me. That was the first truly painful sting. It's amazing how hurtful a smile can be when it's meant for someone else. That night, my sleep was restless. Around 2 o'clock, she slid into bed, bringing with her the cold and the smell of outdoor air. Not a word of greeting, not a single gesture. When the alarm went off in the morning, I brewed coffee and placed a cup on her nightstand. She only glanced at it briefly and thanked me dryly. It sounded as official as a cash receipt. For an entire week, I tried to maintain the usual rhythm. I took care of the housework, suggested leisure activities. She accepted all of it, but gave nothing in return. I tried to convince myself that this was just a temporary crisis in the relationship. During this time, Nora started coming over more and more often. She is 2 years younger than my wife, has a sharp tongue, a busy schedule, and large brown eyes that seem to notice every little thing. Nora could drop in for a minute but end up staying for 2 hours. In the kitchen, they would constantly gossip and laugh, looking from the outside like best friends. However, as soon as my wife left the room to do laundry or answer a call, Nora's facial expression would instantly change. The changes were subtle, but they were enough to understand. She saw some truth that was hidden from me. One day, while I was loading the dishwasher, she leaned against the kitchen island and asked if everything was all right with me. I answered affirmatively, to which she ironically wondered if that had become my new motto. She touched the soap dispenser and added that her sister had been too busy lately. Work? I clarified. Of course, Nora replied. In her voice there was not irony, but rather a deep weariness. She had her own busy life in the city center, work, and endless errands. She could be serious until she started laughing. I didn't like the tone of our conversation, those strange glances and pauses, but I consciously ignored them, not wanting to invent problems out of thin air. Nevertheless, the atmosphere in the house continued to cool. It wasn't some kind of large-scale event, but rather a series of small, painful jabs. She started taking her dinner to the living room, stopped being interested in my work projects. She left the house early, supposedly for meetings, and came back when I was already asleep. If I tried to touch her hand, she would pull away as if I were a coat rack that had been mistakenly placed in the wrong spot. One Thursday, I directly asked if I was missing something important. We were in the kitchen again. She was eating a salad, and I was chewing a sandwich that seemed tasteless to me due to anxiety. I asked if we had had a fight, if maybe I had just forgotten about it. She irritably stabbed a tomato with her fork and asked why I always made everything about myself. She declared that the world did not revolve around me, that she had just had an incredibly tough week, and that she didn't have the energy to babysit me. I replied that I didn't need babysitting. I was only asking her not to push me away. She just snorted, calling me too sensitive. I remained calm and clarified that I wasn't sensitive, but precise, and that there was a huge difference between those concepts. The next morning, she left at dawn, not even touching the coffee. I stood by the window and watched her car disappear past the gate. The rear lights blinked, and that seemed to me like an undeserved farewell. By profession, I manage sites at a large construction company. My crew consists of reliable people. Rob handles the electrical, Marco handles the inspections, and I take on everything that no one else wants to do. These are straightforward people who instantly sense falsehood. On Friday, Rob, walking past during my phone call, raised an eyebrow meaningfully. Later, over lunch, he remarked that I had become too quiet and wondered if I had broken something expensive. I replied that everything was fine, but he compared my voice to that of his son when he dented his truck. I forced a semblance of a smile and said that it had just become too noisy at home. He advised me to rearrange the furniture, but I clarified that the nature of the noise was quite different. Rob shrugged and remembered his ex-wife, who was so deeply immersed in her phone that in the end, they became complete strangers to each other. These words made me think, and I completely reevaluated my routine. If she wasn't present in my life, then I shouldn't force myself on her either. On Monday, I drew up a clear plan in which there was no room for grand gestures, only dry logic. All the garden work that I usually left for Saturdays, I moved to weekday evenings. I gave up some of the shared rituals that had long since become pretense. I stopped going to trivia nights with her friends on Wednesdays and canceled the Sunday coffee trips during which I was just a driver, while she texted someone and laughed at jokes that had nothing to do with me. The money saved, I transferred to a separate account to clearly define financial boundaries. I moved my things to the guest bedroom and left a short note on the kitchen board saying that my schedule had changed and that I shouldn't be waited for. She only paid attention to this when I missed the latest trivia night and her friend Mia asked about my absence. My wife found me in the garage while I was fixing the lawnmower. She asked if I had forgotten about something important. I replied that maybe I had, but I would somehow survive missing a quiz about old TV shows. She reminded me that I had promised to come, but I objected. I had agreed to it as long as it was enjoyable. I wiped my hands and said directly that I was tired of being her personal chauffeur and laugh track. She froze, not knowing what to answer, and then accused me of trying to punish her. I explained that it wasn't punishment, but adaptation to new circumstances. She called my behavior petty, but I retorted it would be petty to hide her charger, but I just didn't want to feel invisible. Her face tensed, and she remarked that I sounded exactly like her mother. I suggested that perhaps she had her reasons. She looked at me for a while, and her gaze softened a bit. She apologized for her harshness, citing fatigue and a tough quarter at work, and asked me to cut her some slack. I replied that I was willing to meet her halfway, but not at the expense of my own dignity. She agreed to try and work on the relationship. This was the first brief warming. It felt like a forgotten blanket on the floor that you constantly trip over. The next day, she made my favorite pasta, put on music, and even asked about my progress with a new client. She praised my structured approach, and I decided not to argue. For 2 days, we truly tried to meet each other halfway, but then everything returned to normal. On Sunday evening, she announced that she needed to go to a late strategic session, adding that some people needed to work hard. I just looked at the clock and wished her a safe drive. She snapped back that she was always careful and left hastily. That same day, Nora stopped by with a container of fruit, as if I were a patient recovering from major surgery. We stood in the kitchen, and she remarked that I looked like a person who had been invited to an important meeting but had forgotten to be briefed on the action plan. I replied that I had to improvise. When she asked about her sister, I mentioned the strategic session. Nora looked out the window and remarked that her sister was a true professional at hiding in plain sight. I asked her to speak directly without riddles. Nora put the fruit aside and advised me to demand complete clarity from my wife. I replied that I was already doing that, but in my own way, through rules, a new schedule, and distance. She admitted that such an approach had a right to exist. The following Thursday, we had guests over, Mitch and Laura, whom we had met at the gym. We had a barbecue on the terrace. My wife's phone lay next to her plate, screen down, like a loaded weapon. She laughed merrily at Mitch's jokes, and when Laura asked how we were doing, she answered in a saccharine, sweet voice. She declared that everything was great with us. We were just both very busy, and I was constantly away at construction sites. I couldn't help it and intervened, calmly noting that she didn't need my work schedule to be effectively absent from our shared life. An awkward silence fell over the table. Mitch and Laura exchanged glances, and my wife gave me that very look that foretold a grand scandal behind closed doors. She tried to turn it into a joke, telling the guests that I was just in a bad mood. I, however, replied with a cold smile that I was well within my boundaries. This was the first publicly drawn line, one that cannot be moved once it has been drawn. She abruptly pushed back her chair and advised me to relax. I continued to calmly collect the plates, noting that this was exactly what personal boundaries felt like. She went into the house, not letting go of her phone. Mitch awkwardly asked if it was time for them to leave, but I suggested he finish dinner, assuring him that this wasn't a crime scene. Laura watched me closely and noted my extreme precision in words. I replied that it was much better than uncertainty. When the guests left, my wife met me in the hallway with her arms crossed. She accused me of disgracing her. I objected, saying that I had only restored the true state of affairs. She asked bitterly if I really enjoyed fixing everything so much. I replied that what I hated most in the world was pretense, and I suggested she choose one or the other. She just silently shook her head and went upstairs. An hour later, she returned, calmer. This was the second partial softening of the evening. Round two. She said she didn't want to fight and apologized for making me feel humiliated in front of others. I replied that she hadn't made me feel anything. She had merely made a statement that I contested. Her face tensed. She asked me to drop the lawyerly tone. I said I was trying and that I saw the situation clearly. I was not stalking her. She whispered that I wasn't alone in this house. It would have sounded sincere if her bag hadn't already been standing by the door. I asked if she was leaving. She confirmed, reminding me about Mia's birthday. According to her, she had warned me about it, but I objected that she had said it into the void while walking down the hallway. Our house was not a courthouse where official notices are posted. She hesitated and said she would be back late, asking me not to wait up. I wasn't going to. When she left, a message from Nora arrived. I'll be over in 10 minutes. She arrived with takeout food, looking like someone who had spent an hour in traffic and had accepted it. Nora asked if my wife had left. I confirmed. Setting the containers on the table, she declared that she wasn't going to pretend to be neutral. Even though she was a relative by marriage, she remembered who had cooked Thanksgiving dinner when my wife had a headache. I leaned against the countertop. I said she shouldn't have come. Nora replied that she only wanted to say one thing: stop looking for excuses. The fault was not mine. I remained calm and asked what she knew. She bit her tongue, thinking, and suggested that my wife was dealing with something she wasn't naming. In her opinion, I needed facts, not guesses. I asked if she wanted me to spy. She replied that she wanted me to stop suffering in silence. If I wasn't going to confront her, I needed to gain clarity by another means. It wasn't my style, but she advised me to choose any approach except waiting for my own downfall. I looked at the microwave clock, counting the seconds. Nora placed her hand on the table next to mine, not touching it. She said the problem was that my wife wasn't afraid of losing me. A few minutes later, she left. I stayed in the kitchen, looking at my reflection in the glass of the terrace door. The person in the reflection was tired of his own patience. 2 evenings later, my wife announced a 2-day business trip. No details, just a suitcase in the hallway and a tone implying that I should be impressed. She had decided to present me with a fait accompli. I asked if she was leaving tomorrow morning and where exactly. She answered to Cleveland and asked me not to make an issue of it, since it was just a dot on the map. I remarked that it wasn't trivial. She snapped back that she didn't need permission, which she hadn't asked for anyway. Zipping her bag with excessive force, she went into the bedroom. I texted Rob asking for a recommendation. I asked if he had ever used a private investigator. He sent a name and number so quickly, as if he had been waiting for the question. The next day, I met with this man in a nondescript office off the highway. Gray carpet, coffee that tasted like wood. He had the face of a man who had seen too many husbands, who had sought help far too late. He clarified whether I needed confirmation of her schedule. I confirmed only dates, times, and places. I didn't need his opinions. He asked if I was sure I wanted to start this. I replied that I wanted to finish it. He nodded and took a retainer. I returned to work, dealing with things that bent under pressure. Bolts, boards, blueprints. They were honest. If you do things right, they hold. While the investigator gathered information, Nora and I found an unremarkable diner between her apartment and my construction site. Vinyl booths, fluorescent lights, waitresses who call you hun. Doesn't matter if you're 4 or 80. It wasn't a secret place, just a quiet establishment where no one cares about you. She sat down across from me without makeup or jewelry, noted that this place was like a time capsule. I replied that was the point. I said I hadn't come for her to comfort me about things I already knew. Nora objected that I knew less than I should, although still enough. For 10 minutes, we didn't talk about my wife. We discussed shipping delays at her work and a neighbor who had built a raised garden bed but forgot to water it. Simple conversations that didn't feel trivial. When silence fell, she said directly that I was not the problem. I replied that I heard that often, but it never seemed true. She assured me that would change soon. Looking at the cracked sugar bowl, I said I didn't want to misinterpret the situation, since I was married. She replied that she knew that and wasn't looking for a replacement. With a slight smile, she added that she hadn't brought an application for the vacancy. Then she grew serious. She said she didn't want me to think she was trying to gain anything, but she wouldn't pretend not to notice me, and she wouldn't pretend that my wife valued me. I nodded and changed the subject to a sports game on TV. I kept a wall up inside myself. It was the only way to get out of this alive. A week later, at 9 in the evening, Nora knocked on my door. She had a look I hadn't seen before, that of a person who had been struck by something but was holding up steadfastly. She entered and sat down at the table. She took out her phone but immediately put it away without unlocking it. Her hands weren't shaking. She started by saying she didn't want to cross a line. She had been at the mall on an errand and saw her. With whom? With a man in a gray jacket. Tall, his hand on her waist. Nora met my gaze and added that they looked comfortable together. I was silent. She inhaled slowly and explained that she hadn't followed them or taken 12 photos from every angle to bombard me with messages. She took one photograph. She brought it because I had asked for facts. She wasn't going to explain what it meant, only suggested I check it all myself. She slid the phone across the table. The photo was clear. My wife in profile, the man half turned away, his hand resting on her as a sign of ownership. They were smiling at something I hadn't said. The world fell silent. Only the hum of the refrigerator remained. Nora said quietly that she could be wrong. I replied that she was right. She asked me not to make her the reason for my actions. If I decided on something, it should be only because of the facts. I said I understood. She stood up and apologized, adding that she would give anything to be wrong. I replied that she had done the right thing. My voice was steady because otherwise it would have broken. When she left, I called the investigator and increased the budget. I asked him to finish the job and send me the complete package of documents. That week, Nora and I met at the diner twice. Once I arrived looking like a completely drained phone battery. She studied me and asked me to stop punishing myself for loyalty. I objected that I wasn't loyal, just stubborn. She replied that it looked the same from the outside. I said she wasn't making things easier for me. She answered that she wasn't trying to. She was just holding the line together with me. It sounded like a promise, although formally it wasn't one. I appreciated it the way water appreciates a glass. The investigator's report arrived 7 days after the mall incident. It contained dates, time-stamped records, and addresses. The photos matched the one Nora had taken and added to the story I hadn't asked for. There were message transcripts that perfectly aligned with her stories about work sessions. There were enough details to remove the last drops of doubt that I had been keeping in my junk drawer, labeled "What If." I printed the report and placed it on the table. Then I went to the study, opened a drawer, and took out a folder I had started compiling when part of me already knew where this was heading. Blank forms, a list of steps, mediators' names, my bank account number, no shouting, no public theater. I filled out everything necessary. I wrote the notes that a person writes when they've finished rehearsing a speech that no one will hear. Then I called Nora. She arrived at dusk. Seeing the stack of papers on the table, she sat down without an invitation and placed her palm on the wood. She asked if the time had come. I confirmed. She looked at me for a long time and asked if she should leave. I asked her to stay. I just needed someone nearby who didn't lie. She nodded. That was enough. Later in the silence, she said that if I needed help or just didn't want to be alone, she was there. She confessed that I was dear to her and that she had realized it a long time ago. She wasn't pushing, just stating a fact. I thanked her but said I wouldn't rush and needed space. She replied that she understood, and there was not a trace of disappointment in her voice. She said she would accept any boundaries I set. My wife returned late. She walked in with her keys and that same absent look. I was sitting at the table with the open report and the stack of documents. Seeing this, she stopped, asked what that was. I replied, "Clarity." She said she was tired and asked me not to start. I replied that I was already finished. I said these were the documents that ended our relationship, evidence that had allowed me to see the truth. She looked at the photographs. Her face didn't flinch. It just lost its color. She swallowed and said, "All right," I asked again. I asked. She replied that she had no speech and no energy. I remarked that finally we agreed on something. She read the first page and signed where I indicated. She didn't cry or throw things. It all went almost professionally. Two people dividing a project that had failed according to schedule. Finally, she said, looking at the table, that she would need 2 days to pack. I gave her one, saying that I would be gone tomorrow and the house would be at her disposal. She looked at the report and agreed. I slept in the guest room. In the morning, I left early, went to work, and told Rob that I needed to leave by 3 o'clock. He raised his eyebrows again. I replied that it was certain. It was all over. He nodded, like a man who had seen bridges both collapse and be built. He said to call if I needed help. I spent the day at the site, then drove to the lake near the office and sat in the car with the window open. The air was fresh and clean. When I returned home in the evening, her closet was empty. In the guest bathroom, there remained a damp trace where she had last placed a bottle. 2 days later, she started a completely different life. I didn't ask for the address. Changing the locks wasn't revenge, but restoring order. I revised my schedule. A different kind of silence settled in the house, clean and conscious. Nora started coming over more often. At first for small things. She brought baked ziti, bought new towels to replace the worn-out ones. I didn't pay attention to the houseplant until I realized it was alive thanks to her care. We behaved cautiously. For weeks, we simply shared the space, watched sports, cooked together, wished each other good night at the stairs, and went our separate ways. One evening, while I was changing a light fixture and she was holding the bracket, we paused in the hallway under the buzzing lamp. She said she didn't want to be a temporary comfort. I replied that it wouldn't be like that. If we moved forward, it would only be because I decided so, not out of a desire to escape the past. When asked about a timeline, I replied, the natural course of events. She smiled and asked if that was my second language. I said it was my only one. We didn't sign any contracts, letting the days decide for us. After 4 weeks, she left a sweater on the chair, a quiet sign. Silently, I cleared out a drawer for her. At work, things started looking up. I applied for a foreman position that had been vacant for a long time. I started conducting meetings more clearly. When you get rid of excess weight at home, your back gets stronger in any environment. I have no other explanation. I heard about my ex-wife from a neighbor who can't stand silence. Heard about your better half, he said in a conspiratorial tone by the trash bins. He said he had seen her at the store, and she looked like someone who had realized reality far too late. Rumor had it that her new beau wasn't so new to other women. I nodded, noting that these things happen. When asked if I had spoken to her, I answered no. The neighbor looked disappointed, as if I had spoiled his entertainment. Between us, it was over. He wanted details, but I didn't give him any. A closed door is a completed story. A month after all the paperwork was finalized, I caught myself humming in the mornings while making breakfast. Nora was in the shower. The house smelled of coffee and fresh paint. A message came in from Marco about a delivery, and I answered him instantly, which would have surprised the old me. There was a knock. My ex-wife was standing on the doorstep. She seemed smaller. That happens when a person loses power over your mood. We need to talk, she said. About what? My reply wasn't a question. She admitted she had made a mistake, traded something real for something fake. She said she couldn't sleep and wanted to fix everything. I replied that she could fix her own life, but mine was fine. She begged, claiming that I thought she had used me. I corrected her. I didn't think. I knew the facts. She stepped forward, making excuses about pressure and confusion. I reminded her that she had made the choice thousands of times, preferring silence over clarity. I didn't need her excuses. She flinched and suggested we see a therapist. I cut her off. We no longer existed. She promised to work on the relationship. I shook my head. The chance had been when I was still inviting her to breakfast. The bathroom door opened. Nora came out in a long t-shirt with wet hair and a calm expression. She instantly assessed the situation. My ex-wife exhaled. So this was the plan all along, you and my sister. Nora leaned against the doorframe, as if leaning on an indisputable fact. It's not a plan, she said. It's a consequence. My ex-wife started screaming, calling us unbelievable and declaring that I was her husband. I raised my hand. I was, in the past tense. She insisted that her leaving had been a mistake due to emotional distress. Nora said calmly, "You thought he would wait forever." My ex-wife turned to me, ignoring her sister, astonished at the speed of the change. I replied that I had left her the moment I saw the truth. The rest was just a matter of time. And when she left, no clock was ticking. She tried to claim rights to what she herself had abandoned, calling it betrayal. But that word didn't sting me. It simply fell at her feet. I advised her to stop the performance, since there was no audience here. She scanned the hallway as if searching for a lost chance by the umbrella stand. But it wasn't there. The house no longer belonged to her. She said I couldn't stop her from trying. I replied that I could stop her from coming over. Don't show up here anymore. There's nothing for you in this house. She started a sentence about how she shouldn't have done it, but I finished it for her. But you did. It's over. I closed the door. The click was quiet and final. Nora exhaled. When she asked how I was feeling, I replied that I was better than just fine. I had finished paying for her mistakes. That was honest, Nora said. I like honesty. We didn't celebrate. We just made breakfast. I fried the eggs. She found the pepper. We ate at that same table where I had once laid out papers and photographs, putting an end to the previous life. After that morning, the days became simple again. 2 weeks later, Nora moved in permanently, without unnecessary words. She just brought a second suitcase and placed it by the dresser. I cleared space for her shoes. We kept shared plans on a single whiteboard. Looking at it, you could see how two balanced people build a life. It wasn't fireworks, it was a foundation. At work, this was noticed. The boss called me in and offered me a new project. He said I had become more precise in my work and was suitable for larger-scale tasks where politics mattered. I objected that I wasn't a politician. He corrected me. You know how to bring clarity. That's different. I accepted the offer and the raise. Rob at the site clapped me on the shoulder like a man who had weathered a storm under a solid roof. Nora and I bought a used SUV that didn't mind potholes. On weekends, we drove to the lake, sat on the tailgate with sandwiches. She read, while I made lists and checked off items. It brought more satisfaction than any conversation. We don't post photos, don't make speeches about love. We wash dishes, pay the mortgage, and show up where we promised. There's no drama in this, only reliability. Sometimes I hear about my ex-wife. An acquaintance told me that things weren't going well for her. The man for whom she had destroyed our life had other plans and other women. She had faced the consequences. Her career was declining because she was spending too much energy on things that didn't pay off. It's not my victory, it's her accounting. I don't feel triumph. I just feel like I'm in my rightful place. That part of me that tried to fix the atmosphere around me has retired. Now I fix things that can be held together with a screw, a drill, or a true word. People expect a story with fireworks, restaurant scandals, or pompous speeches. But it was all different. I saw the truth and chose myself. I closed the door and did not open it to the past when it knocked again. Last week, Laura from the gym asked how I was. There was sympathy in her eyes. I replied that I was better than I could have imagined. She remarked that I looked lighter. I confirmed. It's not hard to carry yourself when you've dropped someone else's burden. She laughed, calling it a beautiful phrase, and I added that it was practical. On the way home, Nora was driving. The sun was shining through the windshield. She didn't ask if I was okay, didn't check up on me like a household appliance. She was just there, allowing silence to be a tool. That's how I knew we would make it. Not because of loud words, but because of small, honest actions. People expect harshness from me toward my ex-wife, but there will be none. That chapter is closed with our signatures. If she decides the door is still open, she will have to find out otherwise again. It's not cruelty, it's clarity. I keep the documents in a safe not to reread them, but as evidence of the moment when I stopped lying to myself. You don't throw that away, but you don't frame it either. It's like a receipt for the most expensive thing you've ever returned. If I am asked about the lesson, I will say, when you're treated like furniture, leave. Don't wait until they remember you. Don't beg for attention. Don't hold the door open for those who walked away from you with their head held high. Write your own rules and follow them. And when the time comes, end it without unnecessary noise. Build a life that matches your inner strength. That's exactly what I did. Now the house is warm, the truck starts on the first try, and coffee tastes like coffee again. And if an unwanted knock comes, I will answer with one true sentence and close the door. My wife got pregnant by my brother, and the whole family found out about it before I did. They didn't warn me or protect me. They didn't even have the decency to allow me to act like a man who has the right to control his own life. Instead, they whispered behind my back. They made plans. They discussed my marriage, my brother's betrayal, my wife's pregnancy, and what, in their opinion, I should do about it all. Their conclusion turned out to be simple. I needed to forgive because the child is family, because my brother made a mistake, because my wife was scared, because my parents couldn't bear the thought of our union falling apart. And I gave them exactly what they deserved. No fights, no court cases, no drunken tantrums on the driveway. I simply disappeared, without goodbyes, explanations, or dramatic speeches, only silence. 5 years have passed, and they are still haunted by the emptiness in the place where I used to be. My name is Wyatt. When it all happened, I was 34 years old. I worked as a construction project manager, mostly on infrastructure projects, bridges, dams, hydroelectric plants, and water supply systems. It's the kind of work nobody remembers until something breaks. I was good at my job, cautious, organized, calm under pressure. Those qualities saved me. They also made my revenge possible. My wife's name was Bryn. We had been married for 5 years, together for 8. She worked as an event coordinator at a luxury hotel in downtown Denver. She had that effortless charm that made people reveal their secrets after the first glass of wine. She remembered birthdays, allergies, seating preferences, the small details that made strangers feel special. I used to think that was thoughtfulness. Now I understand that she was just a master at creating the right appearance. My brother Cole was my best man at my wedding. He is 2 years younger than me, handsome, easygoing, and perpetually broke. He worked as a personal trainer, which in reality meant posting gym videos, flirting with married women, and calling me every time rent was due. I helped him because he was my brother. A few hundred here, a loan there, a referral to a client when he wanted to expand his training business. I fixed his truck, helped him move twice, paid off one of his loans when he swore he was drowning and just needed a chance to start over. Family, right? That's what I believed until the night I came home early. I was working on the reconstruction of a hydroelectric plant in rural New Mexico, the middle of nowhere. No reliable cell service, long shifts, and dust everywhere. You could stand in the shower for 15 minutes and still feel the construction site grime embedded under your skin. We were supposed to stay there another week, but we finished a major phase 2 days ahead of schedule. The boss let us take the long weekend. Most of the crew went out drinking. I got in my truck and drove 11 hours back to Denver. I didn't call Bryn because I wanted to surprise her. That part still makes me laugh sometimes. Not a happy laugh, but the kind of sound a brain makes when it bumps into an old version of yourself and barely recognizes it. I thought I was being romantic. I imagined walking into the house, dropping my bag by the door, and seeing her sleepy face light up with joy. I dreamed of ordering late-night takeout, sleeping in, and maybe fixing the back gate that she kept reminding me about. Instead, turning onto my street just before midnight, I saw Cole's truck parked behind her car. The house was dark. Her car was in the driveway, and his was right behind it. I didn't pull into the driveway. I drove slowly past, parked 3 houses down on the opposite side, turned off the headlights, and just sat there. Your mind turns into a defense attorney when your heart is about to be executed. Maybe his truck broke down. Maybe he needed a place to crash. Maybe Bryn was helping him with something. Maybe he was drunk and she wouldn't let him drive. Surely there was a normal explanation for why my brother's truck was at my house around midnight when I was supposed to be hundreds of miles away. I sat there for 2.5 hours. At 1:30 a.m., the front door opened. Cole came out first. Then Bryn stepped onto the porch right behind him, wearing my old university sweatshirt and nothing else. The porch light was off, but the street light was enough. Enough to see her bare legs. Enough to see him turn around. Enough to see her smile. Then they kissed. It wasn't a quick peck. It wasn't some mistake or accidental drunken misunderstanding that could be excused. It was slow, familiar, comfortable. The kind of kiss shared by people who have done this before and plan to do it again. He got in his truck. She stood on the porch, hugging herself against the cold, watching him leave. Then she went back inside my house. My wife, my brother, my porch. I built that porch myself the first summer after buying the house, sanding the boards, painting the railings, fixing the steps so Bryn could line them with flower pots. She used to sit there with coffee on Saturday mornings and tell me that she felt safe with me. I sat in my truck until dawn. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't go inside. Something inside me just went quiet. By sunrise, I understood one thing clearly. If I made a scene right then, they would get the emotions. They would get tears and excuses. They would have a chance to take control of the situation. I didn't want to give them that chance. I needed the truth. So I drove to a motel off Highway 25, rented a room for a week, and became a stranger to my own face. The next morning, I went home as if nothing had happened. Bryn was in the kitchen brewing coffee. For a moment, she froze in surprise, and then she faked joy. "Wyatt, you're home," she exclaimed. "Finished early," I replied. She came over and hugged me. I hugged her back. That was the first time I learned what kind of composure a person can have when there's nothing left inside them that needs protecting. She smelled like shampoo and the lotion I bought her. I kissed her on the top of her head and asked how she was doing. She said she missed me and that the house was too quiet when I wasn't there. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "I missed you too." For the next 7 days, I played the role of husband. I kissed her goodbye in the morning, told her I had meetings, paperwork, and site inspections. I brought home takeout twice. I asked about her day. I watched TV with her. I even fixed the backyard gate because Cole was apparently too busy to come over and do it. Later, that detail would matter. While she thought I was at work, I was conducting an investigation. First, I checked the bank statements. Money transfers to Cole. $200, $150, $300. Random amounts over several months. When I had asked about them before, Bryn said Cole was buying groceries and helping around the house while I was away. She said she was just paying him back. "He's been so helpful," she kept saying. That word sounded disgusting now. Next, her phone. I know people like to argue about the right to privacy. Let them argue with someone else. When your wife is sleeping with your brother in the house you pay for, and maybe carrying his child, you stop caring about the moral philosophy of a locked screen. She left her phone on the bathroom counter while she was in the shower. The password was still our anniversary date. That hurt almost more than if she had changed it. The messages went back 5 months. 5 months of planning meetups around my work schedule. 5 months of jokes about how they almost got caught. 5 months of Cole asking when I was leaving again. 5 months of Bryn confessing that she hated sleeping alone. There were photos, voice messages, details, everything I wish I could carve out of my memory with a knife. I didn't delete anything. I took screenshots and saved them to a cloud drive she didn't know about. I forwarded copies to a new email address, photographed the bank statements. I began building a timeline with the same precision I used for project reports. Dates, transfers, work trips, messages, hotel and gas station receipts, photographs. And then I found the pregnancy test. It was in the bathroom trash can, buried under tissues and makeup remover pads, as if she believed shame could be hidden under a layer of cotton. Positive, clear as day. She hadn't told me, but she told Cole. That same evening, I checked her messages again. 3 days earlier, she had sent him a photo of the test. His response was, "Shit, is it mine?" She replied, "I think so. He hasn't touched me in months." That phrase broke something inside me. Not because it was a lie. There was some truth to it. I had been absent 6 of the last 8 weeks. When I came home, I was exhausted. We had drifted apart, that's true. Fatigue, busyness. Couples go through such periods. But she wrote it as if I were the problem. As if my job, paying the mortgage, her car, and helping my brother when he needed money, somehow made me responsible for what they had done. I sat on the edge of the motel bed and stared at the wall for a long time. Then I added the pregnancy test to my timeline. For another 2 weeks, I virtuously played the devoted husband. I cooked dinner, asked about her needs, held her in bed. I kissed her forehead when she complained of being tired. I saw her touch her belly when she thought I wasn't looking. Inside, I was already gone. The only thing I didn't know yet was how deep the rot had spread. That came out at a family barbecue, a Sunday at my parents' house, a regular family gathering, Dad at the grill, acting like flipping burgers is a sacred male ritual, Mom carrying bowls of potato salad as if expecting the whole neighborhood, Aunt Linda fussing over napkins, Uncle Frank pretending to help while mostly drinking beer, Grandma sitting in a lawn chair, judging everyone with the confidence only 80-year-old women possess. Cole was there. Bryn came too, in a loose sundress that hid her early pregnancy, which she still hadn't told me about. Everyone was acting normal. Too normal. By that point, I had learned to watch very carefully. Cole and Bryn didn't stand too close. They barely talked, but they moved around each other like magnets, pretending not to. A glance over the cooler, a half smile at the patio table, his eyes dropping to her belly when she thought no one was watching. I was watching. But worse than that was that my mother saw it too. And my father. And my aunt. And they weren't confused. They were watching. That was the first cold jab of suspicion. I decided to test my hunch. I grabbed a beer, leaned against the deck railing, and said to my father, "Looks like the New Mexico project is getting extended another 6 months. They want me to oversee the next phase. The money's great." My mother's face changed instantly. It wasn't disappointment or ordinary worry. It was panic. "Oh, honey," she said, "is that really necessary? You're already gone so much." Bryn stared at her plate. Cole suddenly became deeply interested in the label on his bottle. My father put down the spatula. "Wyatt," he said, "can we talk inside for a minute?" There it was. I followed him into the kitchen. My mother came with us. Aunt Linda, too. They closed the door behind me as if I were 16 and had scratched the family car. My father cleared his throat. "Son, we need to discuss something." I stayed silent. My mother folded her hands in front of her. It was her church face, her crisis face, the expression she used when she wanted to sound gentle while pushing you where she wanted you to go. "We know how hard you've been working," she began, "and we're proud of you. Really. But Bryn has been struggling." "Struggling?" I asked. "You've been gone so much," Aunt Linda added quickly. "A woman gets lonely, Wyatt." It was almost funny. My wife got pregnant by my brother, and Aunt Linda somehow blamed my work ethic. My father looked uncomfortable. "Cole has been helping around the house," he said, "and things got complicated." I kept my face blank. "How complicated?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "They got close," she whispered. "Too close." I nodded once. My father continued. "We talked to both of them. It's over now." Of course, they talked to both of them. Of course, I was the last item on the agenda. And then my mother said, "Bryn is pregnant." I looked at her. "When is she due?" They exchanged glances. That look told me everything before the words came. "November," my mother replied. There were 8 months left until then. I had been gone most of the last 2 months. My father spoke carefully. "There's a chance, Wyatt. We don't know for sure, but there's a chance the baby is Cole's." "A chance," I repeated. My voice sounded strange even to me. Flat, empty. My mother reached for my hand. "They made a terrible mistake, but they've stopped. And this child, yours or Cole's, is still family." Still family. There are phrases that sound harmless until someone uses them as a knife. "We need to get through this together," she continued, "as a family." The kitchen door opened. Grandma walked in with an empty paper plate. "Oh, good," she said, as if someone had finally taken the casserole out of the oven. "You told him." No one moved. She patted me on the shoulder. "Wyatt, honey, these things happen. Your grandfather and I went through hard times in the early years, too. You get through it. That's what family does." That was the moment. Not the kiss, not the pregnancy test, not the messages. That exact moment, I lost all of them. Because they knew. They had known all along. They had discussed it without me. Planned how to break the news. Decided which words to use. Mistake. Struggles. Loneliness. Family. They held meetings about my marriage, my wife, my brother's child, and my future. And somehow I was the only person not invited. I looked at my father. "How long have you known?" He didn't answer right away. My mother cried harder. "Wyatt, please don't focus on that right now." That meant long enough. I stepped back. I needed air. No one tried to stop me. Outside, the family barbecue continued in that strange, frozen atmosphere that happens when everyone knows what happened, but no one dares admit they were eavesdropping. I sat down on the porch steps. Cole came out 30 seconds later. Of course he did. "Hey, man," he said. I didn't look at him. He sat down, keeping a distance of a few feet, which was wise of him. "I know Dad talked to you," he said. I stood up. "I'm leaving." He blinked. "You're not staying for dinner?" "No." Bryn appeared on the driveway right on cue, as if waiting for her entrance. "Wyatt," she said softly, "can we talk when you get home?" "Sure." That word meant nothing. I got in my truck. In the rearview mirror, I saw all of them. My wife, my brother, my parents, my aunt, my grandmother. They were watching me leave. They probably thought I needed time to cool off. They thought I would come back angry, then broken, then ready to negotiate. What they didn't understand was that there was nothing left to negotiate. I drove straight to Terrence's place. We went to college together. He graduated from law school, and I went into construction. Now he handled trusts, property disputes, and divorces. He had seen enough of them to understand how ugly people get when money and guilt share a room. Most importantly, he wasn't family. Terrence opened the door in sweatpants with a beer in his hand. One look at my face was enough. "What happened?" "I need a lawyer," I said, "and I want to disappear." He let me in. At the kitchen table, I laid everything out: screenshots, bank transfers, the timeline, the pregnancy test, the barbecue, the family intervention. He read in silence. With each page, his jaw clenched tighter. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "God, Wyatt, what are our options?" In that moment, he stopped being my friend and became my lawyer. He pulled up property records, bank agreements, car titles, insurance policies. "The house is solely in your name," he stated. "You bought it 3 years before the marriage. Can she make a claim on it?" "Unlikely. It's separate property. You maintained it, paid the mortgage, made the renovations. She can make noise, but her position is weak." Next document, joint savings account. Savings. Current balance, about $142,000. Based on deposits, most of the money was mine. "Can I take it?" "Legally, yes, you're the account owner. She might try to contest it later, but with your evidence and contribution history, you have a strong position. Do it." He looked at me carefully. "Once you start, there's no going back." I almost smiled. There was no going back anyway. When my brother walked out of my house at 1:30 a.m., he nodded. What did I want? I didn't need confrontations. I didn't need closure or explanations. I wanted to completely remove myself from their lives, legally, financially, and physically. I wanted them to wake up one day and realize I was gone, with no way to contact me. Terrence was silent for a long time, then opened a blank document. "Okay," he said, "then let's do this cleanly." On Monday morning, I called my boss. I said there were family circumstances and I needed a leave of absence. "How long?" "6 weeks. I had 8 weeks saved up. I never took time off. Reliable Wyatt, dependable Wyatt, the guy who always covered for everyone." "Take whatever you need," my boss replied. "Family comes first." If only he knew. Then I texted Bryn. "Project extended. Won't be home for a month. Love you." The reply came in seconds. "Missing you already." I stared at the heart emoji for a moment, then put the phone down. By Tuesday, Terrence had everything ready. On Wednesday, I opened a new account at a credit union in Colorado Springs. Different city, no branches near the house, unfamiliar tellers, no mutual friends. I transferred the savings. $142,000 vanished in seconds. Then the checking account, another $18,000. I removed Bryn from the authorized users list on all credit cards where I was the primary holder. Then I closed those cards entirely and opened new ones elsewhere. I removed her car from my insurance policy. The car was in my name, and I made the payments. She drove it to work every day, never thinking about who kept that driving legal. That was now her problem. On Thursday, I met with a real estate agent in Colorado Springs. "I need a quick sale," I said. "Quiet listing, no yard signs." He perked up the way young agents do when they see a commission. "We can do that. With your upgrades, list it for $650,000. Do it." On Friday afternoon, a cash offer came in, $635,000. closing in 30 days. I agreed. Bryn had no idea that our home was already disappearing from her life. On Monday, divorce papers were filed. I didn't serve them personally. A process server came to her workplace and handed her papers ending our marriage while she stood in the lobby of a luxury hotel, smiling at guests. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Bryn, ignored. Another call. Ignored. Then messages poured in. What is this? Wyatt, call me. You can't do this. We need to talk. Then my mother called. My father, Cole, Aunt Linda. I let them call. By evening, I had 17 missed calls from Bryn, 12 from my mother, 8 from my father, 23 from Cole, and several from relatives who suddenly remembered my number when consequences began. I didn't listen to a single voicemail. On Tuesday, I called HR. I want to transfer, I said. Where to? The Alaska division. A pause. It's pretty remote up there. That's the point. Keyboard clicks. We have 3 infrastructure projects there. Renewable energy installations, pipeline inspection, remote housing construction. Minimum 6 months, usually longer. How soon can I start? How fast can you get there? 3 weeks. Then welcome to Alaska. That same day, I bought a new phone. New number, new carrier. I kept the old device and put it in a drawer. Not because I planned to answer, but because I wanted to see how long guilt would scream in a locked room. Over the next few days, I packed my things. 1 suitcase of clothes, good tools, laptop, important documents, passport, birth certificate, social security card, the divorce case file, and copies of the evidence. Everything else stayed. Furniture, dishes, wedding photos, the couch we picked out together, the bed she cheated on me in, a painting from our honeymoon, a stupid decorative bowl she said tied the entryway together. All of it was tainted. On Saturday evening, I wrote 1 sentence on a piece of paper. The house closes in 23 days. Be out by then. No signature, no explanation, no anger. Just facts. I left the note on the kitchen table. On Sunday at 3 a.m., I loaded the truck. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway and looked at the house one last time. The porch I built, the garden Bryn planted, the kitchen where my mother would have expected me to forgive everyone over a cup of coffee. The hallway Cole probably walked down barefoot, feeling at home. For a moment, grief washed over me, but it passed. I got in the truck and drove north. Denver disappeared with the sunrise. I didn't look back. Alaska didn't welcome me warmly. It swallowed me whole. I arrived in Anchorage on Wednesday. Even in late spring, the air was sharp. The mountains looked unreal, as if painted by someone who was never told not to be excessive. I checked into a motel, unpacked my suitcase, sat on the bed, and felt nothing. Not freedom, not sadness, not triumph, just silence. My new job was supposed to start in 2 weeks, but I called my boss the next morning. I'm here early. Any chance I can start now? He laughed. Already trying to impress us? No, I just want to work. We have a pipeline inspection crew leaving Monday. Remote camp, minimum 6 weeks, barely any cell service. Perfect. And it really was. The remote camp was exactly what I needed. 12-hour shifts, dirt, cold, terrible coffee. 15 men who didn't ask personal questions, because in places like this, everyone is either running from something, paying for something, or trying not to think about something. We worked, ate, slept, and repeated. At night, I lay in my bunk and listened to true silence. Not Denver's city silence, where you can always hear traffic, dogs barking, or the neighbor's garage door. This was empty silence, the kind that demands nothing from you and doesn't care what happened to you before you got here. After 6 weeks, I returned to Anchorage and turned on the old phone. 394 unread messages, 183 missed calls. I scrolled the list just enough to see the names. Bryn, Mom, Dad, Cole, Aunt Linda, Uncle Frank, Grandma. Bryn started with anger. Wyatt, this is cruel. You can't just abandon your wife. I'm pregnant, and you're doing this. Then came please. Please call me. I need to know where to go. You sold our house. How could you sell our house? Then despair. I know I hurt you. I know you hate me. Please, just talk to me once. Cole's messages were worse because they started casually. as if we had missed a basketball game instead of destroying a family. Dude, pick up. I know you're mad. This is too much. Later. I messed up. I don't know what to do. Mom is losing it. Just let me know you're alive. My parents behaved predictably. My mother cried in her messages. My father commanded, call me immediately. This has gone too far. You need to come home and handle this like a man. That made me think. Handle it like a man. That's exactly what I did. That was the problem. I turned the phone off again and put it back in the drawer. Terrence called my new number a few days later. The deal closed, he said. Good. Bryn moved out the day before. Where to? As I understand it, first to Cole's apartment, then to your parents' house. Of course. How much? After all expenses and fees, just under $590,000 net in your account. That number should have meant something. Once it would have represented security, future plans, children, retirement, or that little cabin Bryn and I used to joke about buying. Now it was just data. What about the divorce? Moving forward, her lawyer keeps asking for an in-person meeting. No, that's what I told them. Anything else? They're demanding a share of the savings. I laughed briefly, which surprised both of us. Tell them to keep demanding. I already put that in legal language. 4 months after I left Denver, the DNA results came back. The court ordered it as part of the divorce proceedings. Cole was the father. Probability, 99.97%. Terrence called me during lunch at a site near Fairbanks. You're clear, he said. No child support. No custody? No. No legal connection to the child. None. I looked at the frozen ground and felt the closest thing to relief in all those months. Not joy, exactly relief. Like hearing a lock click behind you when something dangerous is left outside. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. Bryn got nothing substantial, some personal belongings, what was legally hers. No house, no large payout, no part of the life she had expected to keep by replacing me in my own bed. Cole's life began to crumble almost immediately. I learned about it from messages I didn't reply to. He lost clients at his training center when the story got out. Denver seems big until it becomes small. People talk, especially when a man gets his brother's wife pregnant and then tries to play the victim. He moved in with my parents. Bryn had the baby, a boy. She sent a photo to my old phone. He was born yesterday, she wrote. I know you probably won't reply. I know you probably don't care, but I thought you should know. I looked at the picture for 5 seconds. The baby had Cole's face. That was enough. I deleted the photo. Someone will hate me for this. They'll say the child was innocent. They're right. He was innocent. So was I. But no one called a family meeting to protect me. I didn't wish that child any harm. I still don't. But innocence doesn't create obligations. His existence wasn't his fault, but neither was it my responsibility to make his parents feel better. That's the part people prefer to ignore. They wanted me to turn their betrayal into a family story with a complicated but heartwarming ending. I refused. The first year in Alaska passed like a change in weather. Harsh, straightforward, cleansing. I worked constantly. Inspections, installations, bridges in places where the cold makes steel sound different. I rented a small apartment in Anchorage that I barely used. Later, I rented a cabin near Fairbanks. Simple furniture, a wood stove, and half an acre of emptiness. Emptiness became valuable to me. Open space, quiet mornings, no family obligations, no forced holidays, no group chats, no pretending. One evening, I met Freya in a bar near a construction site. She worked as a wilderness guide, ice climbing, dog sledding, backcountry survival skills. She was the kind of woman who looks at a mountain and knows in one glance whether the summit is inviting her up or warning her away. She had light hair, a sharp gaze, and the sociability of a closed gate. You're new here, she noted. A few months. You don't talk much. Neither do you, she smiled. Good. I can't stand chatterboxes. We had 3 beers each. She told me about an expedition where a client ignored instructions and nearly lost 2 fingers to frostbite. I told her about a turbine housing that was installed wrong because some engineer in Seattle decided math was more important than the weather's whims. Neither of us asked about exes. Neither tried to impress. That was the beginning. Freya didn't heal me. Life doesn't work like that. People aren't emotional repair shops. But she lived honestly. She said what she thought. She did what she promised. She never broke down doors I kept locked. At first, that meant more than any romance. The old phone sat in a drawer. Once a month or two, I turned it on. Over time, the tone of the messages changed. First, I was begged to come back. Then they wanted to provoke my anger. Then they just wanted to make sure I was alive. My mother wrote, "Your father can't sleep. He feels like something happened to you. Please, even if you hate us, just send one message." Cole wrote, "I wrecked my whole life. Bryn and I can't stand each other. The baby cries all night. I lost my job and live with mom and dad. You're the only one who came out of this clean." Bryn wrote, "I think about you every day. I know the word sorry won't fix anything. I know nothing will fix anything." They never understood. They thought my silence was punishment, but it wasn't. Punishment requires effort. My silence was the absence of effort. It was my peace. 2 years after I left, an old college friend forwarded a message. "Look, I don't want to get involved, but your family's trying to find you. Your mother is seeing a therapist. Your father had a heart attack last year. Cole is drowning in debt. Bryn is working 2 jobs. They just want to know if you're alive." I replied only once. It was the only message sent back to that past life. "I'm alive. Don't contact me again." He apologized and never wrote again. 3 years after I left Denver, I bought a house outside Fairbanks. A small place, 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, and a view of forests and mountains that make human dramas seem almost offensively insignificant. I paid cash. No mortgage. No co-owners. No one's name but mine was attached to that place. Freya moved in with me 6 months later. She brought gear, books, 2 cast-iron skillets, and a dog that looked like it had been assembled from spare wolf parts. We got married the following summer. No family, no big ceremony, just the two of us, a couple of witnesses, and vows that neither of us treated as mere decoration. Around that time, Terrence mentioned my family during a call about taxes. "Your brother is working retail now," he said. "Okay." "At a sporting goods store. Lost his trainer certification." "Got it." "Your ex-wife is at another hotel. Assistant manager. Things aren't going well for her." "Good." A pause. "Your mother is still in therapy. Your father's health has really declined. Do you need anything else for the tax forms?" Terrence sighed. "No." "Then that's fine." In the 4th year, letters began to arrive. Aunt Linda somehow found my P.O. box number. Maybe she hired someone, or coaxed it out of the right person. Maybe guilt grows teeth when people get desperate enough. Her letter said, "Your father has stage 3 colon cancer. Chemotherapy, poor prognosis. Your mother is hysterical. Cole is barely functional. The family is falling apart. I'm not asking you to forgive anyone. I just want you to know." I read it twice. Put it in a drawer. Did not reply. 6 months later, my mother wrote, "Your father is dying. 6 months, maybe less. He wants to see you before he goes, not to ask for forgiveness, just to see you. Please, Wyatt, whatever we did, don't punish him like this. He's your father." I looked at that letter for an hour. Freya found me at the kitchen table. "What happened?" "My father has cancer." She sat across from me. "Are you going to visit him?" "I don't know." She nodded. No pressure. No speeches about family bonds. No moral lectures from someone who hadn't lived through it. Just presence. 2 weeks later, Cole messaged me through an old social media profile I had forgotten to delete. "I know you won't reply, but Dad is dying. Mom is broken. I destroyed everything. I think about it every day. I'm not asking you to come back. Just let me know you're alive. One word, please." I left the message marked as seen. I didn't open it fully. I wanted him to know I saw it. I wanted him to understand the difference between accidental ignorance and deliberate choice. 8 months after the diagnosis, Terrence called. "Your father is in hospice." "Okay. A matter of weeks, maybe days." "Got it." "Wyatt." "No, I didn't say anything." "You were going to." He paused. "Fair enough." 3 days later, a letter came from my father. His handwriting was shaky, barely recognizable. I read it on the porch as snow covered the yard. "Son, I'm writing because the doctors give me weeks, not months. I don't expect a reply. I don't expect you to care. But I need to say this. I failed you. As a father, as a man. When you needed my support, I chose peace over courage. I chose the appearance of family unity over doing the right thing. Now I understand that I lost you that day when I asked you to forgive Cole before he deserved it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know, you were right about everything. Forgive me. I love you, even if we never see each other again. Dad. My hand trembled. For the first time in 4 years. It struck me. I thought I had burned that part of myself out completely, but apparently grief hides in the deepest folds of the soul. Freya came outside. Are you coming in? My father wrote to me. She sat beside me but didn't ask to read it. What are you going to do? I looked at the mountains, that vast indifferent distance between who I was and who I am now. I don't know. I carried that question for 2 days. Should I go? Should I give a dying man peace? Should I let my mother see me one last time? Should I stand next to Cole at a hospital bed and pretend death made us brothers again? People love deathbed forgiveness because it makes a pretty ending. Someone hurts you. Years pass. That person gets sick. They apologize. You cry. They die. Everyone says healing happened. But healing for whom? For the dying? For the guilty family? For the spectators watching from a safe distance? What about the one who has to reopen the wound so others can feel less like ghosts? On the third night, I stood by the wood stove with my father's letter in my hand. Freya watched from the doorway. If you need to go, go, she said. I'll be here when you get back. And if you don't go, I'll still be here. That was love. No pressure, no ownership, no demand to become more understandable. I read the letter one last time. Then I opened the stove door. I held the paper over the flame and watched the edges curl. Brown, black, ash. I closed the damper. I'm not going, I said. Freya nodded. 3 weeks later, Terrence called. Your father passed away yesterday morning. Okay. The funeral is Saturday. I'm not coming. I figured. Then why call? Because years ago, you asked me to keep you informed of legal and family matters that might affect you. Does this affect me legally? No. Then note that I've been notified. All right. Saturday came. I spent the whole day building a deck behind the house. Freya helped. We measured, cut, drilled, leveled. The dog was terrible at supervision. The air was so cold that your fingers went numb if you took off your gloves for too long. Somewhere 2,300 miles away, they buried my father. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a dull ache in my shoulders from the work and my lungs filling with clean air. By evening, the deck was finished. I stood on it and looked at the mountains. That was the only memorial I gave him. On Monday, Terrence forwarded a letter from my mother. I know you weren't there, she wrote. I didn't expect you to be. But I stood at your father's grave and couldn't stop thinking that I lost 2 men I loved. One to death, the other to my own mistake. Cole spoke at the funeral. He broke down. Bryn came with the boy. He's 5 now. He looks like Cole, but he acts like you. Quiet and stubborn. I don't know if that matters to you. I need you to know. You were the best thing I ever helped create, and I destroyed you. I won't try to contact you again. You've earned your peace, son. I read it once and deleted it. That evening, Freya asked the question that everyone asks sooner or later. Do you regret not seeing him? I thought about lying, because the truth sounds harsh, but Freya deserved honesty. No. Are you sure? People think death changes the rules. It doesn't. He chose Cole and Bryn over me while he was alive. He asked me to swallow humiliation so everyone else could be comfortable. Cancer didn't cancel that. A coffin didn't fix it. She nodded. What about the boy? What about him? Do you ever think about him? I looked toward the stove. He has a father, a bad one, but a father. He has a mother, grandparents. He doesn't need an uncle whose only connection to him is the worst betrayal in his life. That sounds harsh. It is. But isn't it the truth? She accepted it. That's one reason I married her. 5 years after leaving Denver, I turned 39. Senior project manager, 6-figure income, house paid off, honest wife, good dog, real friends who know me as Wyatt from Alaska. not as Wyatt from that family tragedy everyone gossips about. I work on meaningful projects, clean energy, sustainable housing, infrastructure that will still be standing after I'm gone. I build things that have become important to me because my past life taught me how easily people destroy everything. The old phone is now in a box in the garage. I haven't turned it on for over a year. Maybe there are messages. Maybe there aren't. Maybe my mother kept her promise and stopped trying. Maybe Cole still writes when he's been drinking. Maybe Bryn sends news about the child I'll never meet. I don't know, that's the point. They say that holding a grudge hurts you more than those who hurt you. Maybe for some people, that's true. But what I carry isn't a grudge. A grudge is active. It needs to be fed. It wakes up hungry and asks what revenge looks like today. I don't feed that feeling. I don't make plans against them. I don't follow their lives. I don't care if Cole finds love, if Bryn finds peace, or if my mother forgives herself. I simply remove myself. That's all. They wanted me to stay among the ruins and help sweep up the broken glass. I left them standing on it barefoot. There is a difference between remorse and regret. Remorse says, I hurt you and I understand why you can never forgive me. Regret says, I hate the consequences of what I did. My family regretted. I'm not sure they ever truly understood remorse. They needed my forgiveness because it would have made their story softer. It would have allowed my mother to say, we went through hard times, but we found our way back to each other. It would have let Cole claim, my brother and I had issues, but blood is blood. It would have let Bryn argue, people make mistakes, love is complicated. No, some things aren't complicated at all. My wife slept with my brother. My brother got her pregnant. My family knew about it. They chose convenience over loyalty. They asked me to carry their shame so they wouldn't have to. So I put that shame down and walked away. That's the whole story. No hidden twists, no secret reconciliation, no holiday miracle or hospital apology that fixed everything. Just a man who finally realized, family isn't the people who demand forgiveness after betrayal. Family is the people who don't put you in that position in the first place. Someone will call me heartless. Maybe I am. But I sleep peacefully. I wake up next to a woman who has never made me doubt the sincerity of her love. I drink coffee on a deck I built myself. I drive to work through cold air and mountains. I come home to a house where every room belongs to my present, not my pain. In Denver, they might still talk about me. Maybe there's an empty chair at the holiday table. Maybe my mother looks at the door whenever someone arrives. Maybe Cole sees my name in old photos and feels everything tighten inside him. Maybe Bryn wonders what her life would have been if she had chosen honesty over betrayal. Maybe the boy asks why one person is missing from the family stories. Maybe they lie. Maybe they tell the truth. None of it reaches me anymore. That's what they never understood. The ultimate revenge is not fire. It's not screaming. It's not destroying someone else's life with your own hands. The ultimate revenge is becoming unreachable, building a life so full without them that their guilt has nowhere to land. They wanted closure. I gave them absence. They wanted forgiveness. I gave them nothing. And that nothing became the loudest sound they ever heard. The silence was not my punishment. It was my peace. And their prison was what they made of it themselves.